Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Bradford. Alongside me is Logan Camden, and today we are joined by a very special guest. I believe the most featured guest on Nerd Sesh this year, which a lot of people are calling the most prestigious honor in all of sports media. With a broken arm, we've got Tyler from Hoop Venue. How are you today, my friend?
I'm doing great, man. I set aside 9 hours today to talk about the top 10 contenders in the NBA. No, I'm super excited to be back. This is the best time of the year for basketball fans, in my opinion. And yeah, man, I'm excited to talk about some of these teams because I feel like I might have some curveballs for you, but we were talking off air, and you might have some curveballs for us as well. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, I'm really excited, man.
We'll see. I do think the back half of this list, there's a lot of opportunity for sort of freedom of expression, a little bit of creativity. Definitely kind of have to get wonky almost because there's not like 10 super strong teams necessarily, but that is what we're doing today. We're doing our final edition of the top 10 contenders. Logan and I have been sort of updating this list every 6 weeks or so throughout the year. This is our final edition. We have to plant our flags in the ground because going into the playoffs, this is it, man. This is the real deal. So, of course, we're bringing on Tyler to get his perspective, his list as well, ask some of the big playoff questions we have about these teams. And before we get into it, I don't want to shout out any honorable mentions because I don't know who's going to be on your guys' lists in the 8, 9, 10 spots, and I don't want to spoil who I left off. So I think if there's any teams that we're all in agreement of like, oh, that's a tough cut, we can just talk about them after we get through the 10 or when it comes up naturally. So, Tyler, you're our guest. Let's throw it to you first. Who do you have in the 10 spot?
So my 10 spot is still kind of up in the air right now. I've got 3 teams in the mix, and I ran into this dilemma, and I want to kind of ask you guys what you think. So okay. I feel like when you get to the back end of this list, the 10, 11, 12, even 9, 8 spot, it's more of like the long shot. You just have to get extremely lucky, like whether it's injuries, whether it's hot shooting. And I ran into this dilemma where I was like, there is a team in the West. So I'll just throw out this team. I'll actually name all the teams I'm running through, and we can maybe even talk about all of them if you guys have them. So I think of this group. So I've got the Clippers, the Hornets, and the Sixers. These are the 3 teams I have here. And I think the Clippers are the best team of the 3. I think the Clippers, they're especially like they can beat you so many different ways on offense, and they have Kawhi Leonard, who's one of the most reliable just pieces in basketball. And I look at them. I look at the fact that they have the number 1 transition offense against top 10 defenses, and that's a big function of them getting Garland, Mathurin, injecting some life into this team. They also have a top 2 half-court offense against top 10 defenses, so it's like they can just do so much well. They're good in the turnover economy department. They've got some defensive concerns. They don't really have any rebounders, which I think is a problem. But I look at them and I'm like, they to me are a really good team. The problem is any path for them into the playoffs means you have to face the Thunder or the Spurs in round 1.
Yeah.
And I just do not think they have a chance of beating either of those teams. Maybe an absolute long shot against the Spurs if there's something weird with Wemby's rib. But the Thunder, I just don't think they have a shot at all against. Whereas I look at the Sixers and the Hornets and I'm like, they, to me, feel like they have a more realistic shot to beat some of the top teams in the East. Totally. So maybe I lean towards them just because they have more of a long shot run. But I want to talk about the Hornets because they were the team I actually did land on in my 10 spot. Their offense is just really high functioning, right? Like the space they have, the pace they play with, their ability to move the ball and move players around, their ability to manipulate space, I think is their actual superpower. When you talk about their offense, there's something they can counter. They have a counter for every type of defense, right? Like the game I always reference when I talk about them is Thunder Hornets early January, where they beat the Thunder by 30 and hang 124 points on them. Their big counter in that game was OKC's defensive game plan. Let's keep Chet on the baseline. Let's pre-switch everything. We want to roam, have him as our rim protector, because not only do you need that last line of defense, you also need to keep Moussa Diabate off the offensive glass. That's another superpower of theirs. And Charlotte was like, well, what if we just put Knipple there? Like, what if we make Chet switch onto Knipple? Now you have a 43% three-point shooter in the corner who can play off the catch. And there were a few situations where not only did he get an open corner 3, there were some where Chet was pulled and he couldn't help at the rim. There were some where Knipple actually just destroyed Chet on a closeout and connected the offense as an extra passer. And I think Charlotte's ability to manipulate space is a real superpower. However, they really lack a reliable half-court 2-point scoring presence. And that, I think, is the huge difference between them and Indiana last year. I've seen that comparison a lot because they're both high-level offenses with a really good ball mover at the helm. But You don't have your Siakam. You don't even have a guy like Halliburton, who's an efficient isolation scorer against mismatches.
Right.
So you run into this issue where if a team can switch effectively and keep you off the offensive glass, you're essentially, your offense becomes the 3-point shot, and you're just living or dying with the 3-point shot. And the reason I landed on them at my 10 spot is because there is a long shot out there in the universe where they just get blistering hot for the first 3 games of a series and jump out to a 2-1 or 3-0 lead, and then they're in a position to win. So to me, when I was deciding between these 3 teams, I think Charlotte's long shot offense, the fact that they take like 50% of their shots from 3, the fact that they have so many guys on the court who can make decisions, put the ball down, make shots, I think their offensive ceiling is so high that I do give them just a slight fighter's chance to beat anybody in the conference.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, I also have Charlotte in my 10 spot. Versus the Clippers, I don't have them on my list. I did consider them. I think that they would have been the second team off, and there's another weird team in the mix here where like health has just become such a massive concern for them, that being the Lakers, who, spoiler, I don't have on my list. But I promise, guys, as low as I've been on the Lakers all year, if they actually were healthy, I would have had them like in my 8 spot or something, but I just have no idea what to expect from Luka or Reeves, so I can't have them on here right now. The Clippers and the Hornets, what they have in common is just like 2 of the biggest single season turnarounds that we've seen, like genuinely ever, right? If you just look at the basketball these teams have been playing for the last few months, since the Harden trade, the Clippers are 29-16, but since January 1st, like the Hornets have been as good as any team in basketball, and they've been the best offense in basketball. So I am very high on them. I share some of your concerns. Logan, where do you come down on that? Are you buying the Charlotte as a top 10 contender?
No, I wanted to get Charlotte on my list, and they're probably the toughest cut for me. And I think Tyler gave a great reason as to why they should be in consideration for this, because of that offensive ceiling. Like, say hypothetically they get matched up in that number 1 seed against Detroit. Cade comes back. He's not fully healthy. And, like, I think that Detroit's defense is going to even some of that out too. But Charlotte's offense comes so easy some nights where they can just barrage you with 20-plus threes and run you out of the building, that I do think there's a chance for them to just boat race a team really early on in a series and potentially have a big-time upset. I will say, it disheartens me to hear you say that there are people that are comparing them to Indiana from last year, because that makes me think, holy shit, people just forgot what Tyrese Halliburton was. That's kind of my only gripe with that. Halliburton's so special to me that, like, I understand where it's coming from, a place of elite offense, but Hallie and Siakam, I think, are way better than the top 2 for Charlotte in just terms of their floor game to game. Carson.
Yeah, the Pacers are definitely better, but like I see where it comes from when you have sort of the playmaking savant, you have this really beautiful sort of free-flowing offense, and then you have a team that started the year slow like Indiana did. But I mean, Charlotte is 39-20 when their big 3 play. I've talked about this a lot. They have a 133 offensive rating in the minutes that their big 3 share. Like, this is a team that has been awesome for so long that it would feel wrong to me to keep them out of the top 10. Like, they've been playing at such a high level for such an extended stretch, and I do think the offense is one of the very most potent in the NBA. Like, I just made myself go through the exercise before this episode of thinking about, okay, going into the playoffs, which are the 5 offenses I trust the most? Which are the 5 defenses I trust the most? And I still landed on Charlotte as being tied for my 5th offense, right? Not the number 1 offense that they've been for several months because of some of the concerns that you laid out, Tyler. But I also think you can't deny this has been the most prolific and dynamic pick and roll attack in basketball. They have so many different layers to those actions. I think you put it beautifully with the ability to manipulate space, but also just the number of offensive threats on the floor from the perimeter, the number of different players they can use to screen for LaMelo, who can be so effective playing off of him. And LaMelo, I'm going to have to dig into this when we do our All-NBA teams, but like, I think he has a case. I was just looking at the players over the last 2 years with the biggest offensive on-off swings in the NBA. You know who is number 1 above Nikola Jokic and then Steph Curry, and then it's like Tyrese Halliburton and Shea and Giannis and Kawhi? it's LaMelo Ball, man. And like this season has just been his magnum opus, like a total testament to how great an offense can be when you're able to supplement and work around some of his limitations as a 2-point scorer. If you're able to just bully teams on the offensive glass, and if you're able to put like lethal 3-point shooting around him, you can be the best offense in basketball. And that's what Charlotte has been in the regular season. But then the question is, does it translate as well to the playoffs? And I think there's a world where, like you're saying, they can outgun anybody. I mean, this team, since January 1st, I think they're making 18 3-pointers a game at a 38% clip. Like, I want to actually run this by you, Tyler, because Baldy over here looks at me like I'm crazy when I say this. Do you think it's crazy to say the Charlottes have the best 3-point shooting big four in NBA history? And when I say big four, I mean like truly 1 through 4 are all weapons at volume. You can't say like Steph, Clay, KD, and Alfonso McKinney, because that's not a big four. That's a big three.
Well, he says that
McKinney.
to cherry pick his argument. I'm not taking anyone over
No,
that
I'm
Warriors
anticipating
squad,
what you're going to say. No, by the way, I said this from the jump. I'm talking about a big four. Do you consider LeBron, Anthony Davis, and Alex Caruso a big three? No, that's a great duo.
We should.
Alex Caruso. Maybe we should, actually, because I love Caruso. But I just think it's insane, man. The fact that you have 4 guys who can easily get up 8 to 10 threes a game off movement from crazy range in all these different ways, it's nuts.
Yeah, I mean, off the dome, I can't think of any teams that would compete with that. Maybe you look at like, I remember the 2021 Clippers were an absurd 3-point shooting team. They probably have a few guys. Like you got Kawhi, Paul George, Morris, Batum. That's a pretty nasty quad. The other team that came to mind is the Nets, the peak Nets. You get Kyrie, Harden, KD, and Joe Harris. That's to me is probably the one. That's
a really good one. Or the other one I think would be the 2024-2025 Celtics with some combination of Tatum, White, Pritchard, and then they have so many guys. I mean, I think Porzingis is the 4th most dangerous, but you could make a Holiday or a Jaylen Brown or like a Horford, like in terms of top to bottom shooting, that's the best. Sam Hauser. You're right, actually, in terms of pure 3-point shooting. But the difference with this team is everybody can do it off the dribble. Everybody has the size component where they can do it against contests and off movement. Yeah. And so, like, it's the volume that really moves me, where I'm like, we're not talking about stand still, catch and shoot guys here. We're talking about, like, absolute weapons. But you are probably right with the Nets, because those are, like, 3 guys who can do it at volume, off the dribble as well as anybody, and also make, like, near 40% of them. So, all right, I think that's a good shout. But the Hornets are on the Mount Rushmore. Like, they're one of the best 3-point shooting teams that we've seen, and they're a top 2 offensive rebounding team. So my concerns with them come down to the offensive nitpicks we're talking about. Like, I do worry about them facing really athletic switching defenses. Now, I do think, like, there is so much movement in this offense. There is so much shooting. They are so well coached and so smart that, like, they're still going to produce offensively because Khan is such an off-ball weapon and Brandon Miller is such an off-ball weapon, and they usually do create that margin on the offensive glass. So it's not that I'm worried about anybody shutting them down. It's I'm worried about if you're not having to deal with the chaos of a LaMelo Khan guard-on-guard screen, and you're like, we can just switch that. And now you put Melo in a position where he has to beat you as an isolation scorer. Like, he's just obviously less effective at doing that as he is being this great playmaker where there's all this movement and shooting flowing around him. So many guys stressing the defense. Like, he is still one of the worst 2-point scoring stars in the NBA. The worst, honestly. And I think you see that some in the Celtics game even, where it's like a lot of settling when he's forced to try to score one-on-one against a really good athlete. And I do wish that we could just cut his like bad shots down by 10%, because if we could do that, I think LaMelo would be such an outstanding offensive player. But also, there's a reason that he takes some of those bad shots, and it's an inability to create an advantage. So that's the concern. I think that we've seen that in the clutch. I think that's part of the reason that Charlotte is 27th in clutch offensive rating. Like, when games grind down like that, it does become more so about on-ball creation, and especially in the playoffs, the ability to do it against physical and athletic teams. That's my holdup with them offensively, where, again, I think they dropped just a little bit, but I'm more worried about the defense. Because what do you think about that? The fact that they're like 6th in defensive rating since January 1st. Do you think that that is real? Because I'm very skeptical.
I think it's real from the standpoint of this is something that can be done in the regular season because they're just so connected. They defend on a string. Their communication is amazing. Their rotations are amazing. But when you look at the individual like defensive footprint of each guy. Like LaMelo, I worry about guarding in space. Con Knipple, he's pretty solid, but I still worry about his foot speed. Brandon Miller, I think he's actually been probably their second best defender in the starting lineup, and he's been a pretty solid weak side rim protector. But again, I don't know if I trust him one-on-one against a big physical wing. Miles Bridges has his defensive limitations. They're kind of relying on Diabate to cover a lot of what they do with his switchability and his rim protection. Off the bench, they've got some guys like Sion James, I think is actually just a really good point of attack defender already. But I look at their starting five, and that's going to be their closing five. And there are like individual limitations there that I don't think get exposed in the regular season because there isn't hyper intensive scheming. So like you look at a Boston and it's just mismatch city. You look at a Cleveland, same thing, mismatch city, spread pick and roll city. New York even, mismatch city, pick and roll city. So it's like I do think there are limitations where yes, they can defend weaker teams and they can defend on a string and against less intentional scheming. They can put up a top 10 defense, but I don't think it's the type of thing where you look at Denver's size, length, and athleticism, their ability to shell up, that it'll translate to the playoffs. I just don't think they have that signal. And also, one of Charlotte's limitations on offense that kind of bleeds into their defense that is a separator from Indiana is they don't take great care of the ball. So a big imprint that has helped Charlotte throughout the season is that they can win the possession game because they dominate the offensive glass. But if you take away their offensive rebounding and you continue to turn them over, now they kind of bleed on the margins a little bit in addition to taking away some of their most efficient offense. So I look at the landscape of the East and I'm like, man, that slow start really hurt them because if they slide in at 5 or 6, I think they really could blitz New York or Cleveland with their offensive firepower. Like, not that I would pick them to win, but that would be a 6-7 game series. You look at Boston and Detroit, I just think they're both so much bigger, so much more athletic, and so much more switchable than Cleveland or New York. And you look at like what they can do to neutralize Charlotte's offense. And the fact that Diabate is not going to attack a mismatch, the fact that there really aren't mismatches for Miles Bridges to exploit, that's kind of been their calling card where if teams do start to switch, Miles Bridges is going to post up and he's going to get a double team, but you don't have to do that against a Detroit or a Boston. So I think that's the hang up. And then like you said, some of those defensive limitations you run into where teams are going to overwhelm their lack of size and athleticism on defense, their lack of on-ball pressure. So I do think there are limitations there. I do think they're going to have to ramp up Sion James's playing time probably a little bit, which then takes away from what makes them so dominant offensively. There are some trade-offs, but I did make a tweet just yesterday where I said, if you replaced Miles Bridges on this team with Pascal Siakam, I think they'd be contenders.
God. Tyler, the number of times you have said exactly what I was about to say, like I completely agree. If they had like a consistent high-level mismatch stacking forward, it's the perfect counter, right? Because we're talking about, okay, LaMelo isn't a switch beater, but boom, if you find another one who can do it with power, great. Bridges, we saw, like that was a lot of their actual fourth quarter offense against Boston yesterday. It was, all right, let's get that Peyton Pritchard switch every single possession for Bridges. And like, yeah, okay, he can do it against Peyton Pritchard, but he's not good enough in that role for it to be something I'm really confident in come playoffs. So even if it were Julius Randle, and I'm not a Julius Randle guy, but like any sort of legit high-level mismatch stacker, I think totally makes me more confident in this team's playoff offense. When it comes to the defense, I think their defensive rating being what it is in this recent stretch is like totally a testament to Charles Lee. I think Charles Lee is great. He'd be top 3 in coach of the year for me, but I do think like the personnel limitations are just so real. And when you watch a game like last night against Boston, where that is a test against a contender, it does have sort of a playoff feel to it, and teams are really being deliberate with attacking your weak points. I just think there's too many weak points to attack and not enough strong points, especially like in their key starting 5 lineup. But man, and Jaylen Brown is one of the premier mismatch attackers in the NBA, but it's like he's going at Con every possession. And if he's not going at Con, he's going at LaMelo every possession. And like, they just don't have the athleticism. They don't have the strength. They don't have the size to contend. So like Boston, I think would be a terrible matchup for them because they can hold their own defensively. And then I don't see how Charlotte makes them uncomfortable, makes their offense uncomfortable. Detroit, I think, is more vulnerable just because I think Detroit's offense is so much more questionable than Boston's. And like Charlotte is the more talented, better offensive team, but I also think Detroit is so well built in so many ways defensively to counter what Charlotte does. When you talk about athletic, big, physical switching defense, like that's the Detroit Pistons in the Eastern Conference. And so that's where I think they'd have a shot against Detroit. I don't think they would have any shot against Boston, but I think either of those matchups are pretty tough. And I'm just low on the playoff defense, and I do think that holds them back. And that's why I have another team in the East who we can get to in a second who has not been as proven as Charlotte, but I see a playoff formula that I buy a bit more in terms of playoff defense and clutch offense, where I do view those as kind of the two liabilities with Charlotte.
I had one more stat I wanted to throw at you guys that kind of moved me off of the Hornets a little bit because I was kind of riding the high there for a little bit. In last year's playoffs, the team that won the turnover differential won 13 out of 15 playoff series. Like, that was the deciding factor. And obviously a lot goes into that, but I pulled the numbers for every one of the playoff teams against top 10 teams, top 10 offense and defense teams. So I pulled the turnover percentage versus top 10 defenses, and then also their forced turnover percentage against top 10 offenses on the season to get a turnover differential against top 10 offenses or defenses. And Charlotte was dead last in that number. They were negative 4.5 turnover percentage against top 10 teams. The only teams that were even close to them were Portland and Houston. So I do think that is a real limitation for Charlotte. And then, like I said, if you're able to take them off the glass, like, that's why Detroit to me is such a bad matchup, because Jalen Duren is just going to destroy them on the glass. So, and Detroit forces more turnovers even than OKC. They're the number one forced turnover team, and they dominate the glass. So I'm like, I look at Charlotte and I'm like, you just get overwhelmed in that matchup.
Yeah. That is tough. Duren is another guy where I'm like, oh my God, if Charlotte had him, because that's the other thing. It's a big mismatch attacking like 4 or, a real physical bruising center who obviously Musa is great on the offensive glass, but like just physically is more imposing on both ends. A guy like Duren would be incredible, who very briefly was a Charlotte Hornet technically on draft night. But that is definitely concerning. I'm very possession battle pilled. I do think it matters a lot. I also think last year's playoffs, like, it's a little weird because we saw two teams that were so great at it and specialized in it so much that went to the finals. So, like, I don't want to overreact because I'm sure that OKC and Indiana went 7-0 in series that they won the possession battle. But, like, it was the story of the playoffs for a reason. So, I still think Charlotte's too good. I think that offense is too great to leave them out of the top 10. But, Logan, as a little bit more of a Charlotte skeptic, anything else you want to say about them here?
Well, I did want to add one stat that you guys were mentioning. You mentioned the 16 threes on 38% on the season. Only 4 teams have done that in NBA history. So, I mean, they are in really, really rare air. It's the 2021 Jazz, the 23 Warriors, the 24 Celtics, and this year's Hornets squad. So,
how about that?
Really great company. My hang-up with Charlotte is what you guys are talking about, though. It's really the clutch offense. I could see them defending well enough and rebounding well enough. I will say that turnover differential stat is fascinating and yet also damning, Tyler. So that's some good evidence to have that maybe why you should be a little skeptical of Charlotte. For me, it is the clutch offense, though, and specifically when you're talking about a comparison against a team like Indiana. I mean, you guys know it. Your offense can carry you through 85 to 90% of a game. You get down to a game in the fourth quarter with 4 minutes left. You need high, real-deal bucket getters and guys who can kill people in isolation, guys who can win one-on-one. And I think Charlotte's a year away where they're going to have to, shuffle some of these pieces around. They've got a great framework, a great foundation to build off of, but next year it's going to be more about filling in the gaps and addressing some of these little margins where they don't quite match up. But Charlotte's in a really good spot, and I'm rooting for them. I mean, I immensely enjoy watching them play. They're a young, fast team. They play easy offense. Those teams are always awesome to watch. So I'm rooting for Charlotte, but ultimately they were the toughest cut for me.
Yeah, and you worry about a team that is susceptible to physicality on both ends in the playoffs. Like, it's just a different game in that way. So we were talking about this a little bit with Matthew Sponauer, Hornets fan, like the things they're going to want to address going forward, having a high-level sort of point-of-attack wing defender, and then as we talked about, bruising front court talent kind of overall. But I think building an offense and building a team around the big three of LaMelo, Kahn, and Brandon Miller is very easy. I think they're so complementary, and I desperately hope that Charlotte gets to the playoffs. If they get knocked out in the play-in, like, I'm going to be really bummed just because I think they've been playing so well that they deserve it. And also, like, they're just so fun. They're so fun to watch, and I want to see someone have to figure out this offense. So, love the Hornets. But, Logan, who's in your 10 spot?
So I have got the Houston Rockets here in my 10 spot, and Houston's been on a roll recently. They've won 7 straight games. They've been really good over their last 15. Amen, Sengun have looked a little better than that earlier stretch that they had in the year. You just know, like Tyler said at the beginning of the episode, any of these teams in this section you don't really have that much confidence in doing a ton of damage. And I have flipped on one team that is higher than the Rockets in my top 10. I've shuffled some of these teams in this back half of the top 10 around. And Houston belongs. Like, Houston is just so obviously solid enough to the point where, like, they belong here. And also, I'm not going to talk about them today. I really did want to get the Lakers on this list. I wanted to have them in the 10 spot. I wanted to say something optimistic about the Lakers and how good Luka's been and how great they've looked. As Carson and I talked about last episode, they are obviously cooked the rest of the season. So Houston's kind of
unless there's a medical miracle looming over in Europe.
You know what? Maybe I shouldn't count it out. Maybe you're right.
I think Luka's going to come back. I genuinely do think that. But I do not think he is going to be very close to 100%, and I don't think the Lakers can withstand that as a team.
When does he come back too? Because like I wonder.
Right.
I feel like it might be like a game 3 situation.
Totally.
And then it's like, are you down 0-2? And then you need a geriatric Luka Doncic too.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know.
They'd have to probably do the 2022 formula of going up early in a series without him, like when Brunson was going crazy in the first round, and then he was able to come back after 3 games. I agree. I think if things start ugly, because, like, can Luka be ready to start a series 15 days out from the injury? Probably not.
Maybe they give him a random guy's leg. Luka comes back. He's just dropping 40, 10, and 10.
So they did with Tatum.
That's what I'm saying. I wanted to get the Lakers here because ultimately when I think about the ceiling that team can reach with the ease of their offense, it's close, but Houston just has a higher baseline. They don't have the glaring defensive weak points that the Lakers have throughout their roster. Like, they can at least be competent on that end. They have length, they have size, they have athleticism that translates to the playoffs. But we know what's going to get Houston. We've been talking about this all season long, and despite a really strong ending to the season and a really strong stretch, and the things that they do really well, right? They still do rebound at a pretty high level. The offense is going to fall apart. They're going to struggle to protect the basketball. I think the spacing issues are going to bite them, right? Like, their season has effectively been cooked since the ending of January when Adams underwent season-ending ankle surgery. So the Rockets clearly, to me, belong in the top 10 somewhere in here because they are just that solid, but they don't have the ceiling that I think any of these teams, even in my 1 through 9 spot, have. And I will say, in relation to some of these other teams in the East that I have in these 6 to 10 spots, it's due to the weakness of the East and me actually seeing a path is where the Rockets, I just really don't think stack up to the elite teams of the West. And I do see a vulnerability with some of the top teams in the East. So Houston belongs here, but ultimately I am a skeptic as to the ceilings that they can reach in the playoffs.
Yeah, I feel the exact same way. I share a lot of the same concerns, and I did bump them below a few East teams that I think they're in the mix with just because of, the fact that the path isn't really realistic for them. Their half-court offense is just really problematic, right? Like, not only do they struggle to create good shots, they have 2 reliable three-point shooters on their entire roster. They turn the ball over a ton, which is a function of not having an actual point guard. And it's just like, there's so many different ways. You don't even have to get creative with defensive schemes. You just like start blitzing KD, pack the paint, and it's like good luck creating offense unless Tari Eason's making 50% of his corner threes. Or the reason I get a little bit higher on them is because they do have a superpower. They're just so big, athletic, and they're so good defensively. They have a top 5 defense both in the half court and transition against top 10 offenses, which is just a really good signal to have going into the playoffs. They can do pretty much anything you need on defense. They can switch. They can put 2 on the ball. They can run some drop. They've got a lot of guys who can protect the rim, so you can't really manipulate space in that way. Like, if you get Amen Thompson as the low man, okay, cool. If you get Jabari Smith as the low man, cool. If Shepard's the low man, the opposite corner is probably going to have KD, though. So it's like there's always somebody who can rotate to the paint, and they can make offenses kind of play out of structure, which I think is a legit superpower. The other thing is obviously their rebounding. It takes a lot to keep them off the glass, which then starts to open up other offensive avenues. And it's like, I do see a pathway where they escape some playoff series just because they're so good defensively, right? Like, the other team can't get any runouts. They're good in transition because of their athleticism. But then also Kevin Durant's shot making is such a variable that I feel like we can't really even wrap our heads around it. He's shooting 54% from mid-range this season, which means 1.08 points per shot. That's better than the best half-court offense in basketball. So it's like, if Kevin Durant can get a shot up, you are going to be an elite half-court offense. And along with everything else they have with the half-court defense going for. So it's like, I see a world where if you can just get KD the ball 16 feet in somehow without turning it over 30 times, you are going to at least be a competent enough offense to where your defense and your rebounding and all these other things kind of put you in a position to win games. I just don't know if I trust their late game offense to close those games, but they'll be in a position to at least compete to win those games. And I think that just gives them a fighter's chance against a lot of teams. But like Logan said, that pathway in the West is just brutal. And it's really kind of tough to see them making an actual run past the second round.
It is, however, I mean, things have opened up beautifully for them to win a first round series because of the seeding. Like, it's 90% at this point that they're going to get the Lakers, and you got to pick them to win that series considering the state that the Lakers are in. So that's something. But then they go and they face the Thunder, and it's like they get absolutely waxed. And when I do think about this sort of theoretical contender upside, like, genuinely, I think the Hornets are a more uncomfortable matchup for the Thunder probably than the Rockets, just because, again, you have to figure out that offense, an offense that, like you said, did light them up once this year. I just think the Rockets' complete lack of ball handling and the turnover issues and the bad spacing, all that stuff against a defense like OKC's, like, just forget about it. No chance. So I actually left the Rockets off my list at number 11. They were my toughest cut, and I do think they've been playing better. I mean, like, I was pretty much completely out on this team because of all of the basketball issues they have, and also because the vibes were so atrocious, like more so than any other competitive team in the NBA. I'm not kidding. Like, I think last night was kind of a big deal for them. Like, Suns go on a 21-0 run. They're down 20 early in that game, and they actually, like, rally and work their way back into it, and it's against KD's old team, and, like, they kind of came together, and so, like, things are gelling a little bit more for the Rockets. Şengün had that brutal stretch for an extended period in the middle of the season. He's been playing better. Amen has actually been playing really well, but then it's like, the core limitations are always going to be the same. I just think the Van Vliet and Adams injuries were so devastating to this team that had kind of a couple superpowers, right? They were the best offensive rebounding team ever, and they're still very good, but not nearly what they were with Adams. They were killing teams overall in the Adams minutes. The double big look last year was their most effective, and now they've lost that superpower. And then their ability to actually protect the ball quite well last year made them this just possession game giant. I mean, they were like the ugliest half-court offense in the NBA last year, and they won 50 games and went to game 7 of a first-round series because they were possession game masters. And losing Van Vliet and losing any sort of dependable ball handling guard has just been such a problem for them, with the turnover rate being what it is. And it's like, I agree with you, Tyler. The value of KD's shot making is still so supreme. And yet there are stretches where it's like, you don't even feel KD's presence, because the only way he's really impacting the game offensively at this point is with that over the top shot making. And he doesn't have the ball a ton. And when he does, he has the turnover issues, and the playmaking has been questionable. And then you have games like the Lakers matchups where it's like, all right, we are just going to blitz, double, and force the ball out of his hands. And it's like this offense melts into nothing. I totally see the angle of they're so big, they're so physical, and like, they're really talented. This is a team that has KD and Şengün and Amen and like solid depth. And even though all three of those guys are pretty flawed at this point, like especially Amen and Şengün, like, that's still a lot of talent and a lot of size and athleticism on this basketball team, and a lot of defensive talent for sure. But then it's like, Şengün's defense has left a lot to be desired this year. I just don't really trust the key players for the Rockets. I feel like every one of them has a fatal flaw. And then when you put it all together with this group where it's like, they don't have ball handling to support them, they don't have shooting to support them around them, I totally think it's fine to have them in the 9 or 10 spot. I definitely couldn't have them higher than that. And even though, I mean, these last few games have been good, like since January 1st, this team is 15th in offensive rating. They're 13th in net rating. It's just so much mediocre basketball. They're the number 22 half-court offense in the NBA. And even though they do some of these unique things to overcome that, they're not doing them nearly at the level that they were last year or even earlier in the season when Adams was healthy. And so the funkiness of it all, I'm just very low on in a playoff setting.
What do you guys think's next for Houston? Like, what the hell do you do?
Seppuku.
Well, I was gonna ask you like where because I feel like with Van Vliet and Adams, they'd be close to my top
Agreed.
5.
I agree.
Like, so
agree.
it's like you kind of just run it back, maybe.
Yeah.
Hope for some more internal development from Şengün, Amen Thompson, Reed Shepherd.
Right. And that's the disappointing thing about this year is that Şengün and Amen didn't get better by enough for it to make a difference for this team. Şengün started the year really well, and then it's like, okay, all of the same issues that he's ever had as a player are as prevalent as they have been in recent years. Amen, like, again, the finishing with him has been really good. The production and the efficiency has been better, but he is still somebody who, like, just makes your half-court offense so weird, especially in the playoffs. And, his free throw shooting has been good this year. Like, there are some touch indicators with him where you would think he's progressing, and then he's still just like the single worst jump shooter in the NBA, even worse than last year. So I think that's probably what it has to come down to. They don't really have another move on the table. I mean, obviously they're all in on KD and Şengün and Amen, and then around that they can tinker in little ways, but I think it does make sense to say, all right, with Van Vliet and Adams, we'd be weird, but we'd be weird in a way that like actually really makes sense and is imposing and is what we envisioned with this team. When you lose 2 of your 5 most important players, it's a big problem.
So I started this episode with the Rockets in my 9 spot ahead of the Hornets, but now after thinking about it a little bit more, I think I'm going to bump them down, and it comes down to this, right? I think I talked about how these are the spots where you kind of just have to get lucky, and I'm trying to look for like a long shot type of run.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing with Houston that I look at, it's like, let's say you get out of the first round with LA. Let's say, God forbid, Shea has an injury where he can't even play in the second round. That would hurt the soul. That would hurt the soul.
God forbid.
But
I just fucking saw.
Let's
for a second.
Let's just say that happens. I think Houston could get past OKC. I don't think they have a chance of beating San Antonio or Denver either, or Minnesota. I think all 3 of those teams blitz them. So it's like, even in a lucky scenario, you would basically need everybody to get injured for them to get to the finals. And I look at the East and I'm like, okay, if Charlotte goes up against Boston and then Jaylen Brown or Tatum goes down, it's like, okay, or they get really hot from 3. I see that scenario working. But then it's like in the second round, you could beat New York. You could beat Cleveland. You could beat whoever ends up, you could beat Toronto or Atlanta. Like, so I do think I'm going to move Charlotte over Houston for that exact reason. I'm also considering Philly, but I want to wait till we talk about Philly because that's a weird team, and I'm assuming you guys both have them on your list.
I don't know what Logan is doing here because he has been hating on Philly all year long, and he's talking about this team in the East who he has here, and it's not Charlotte, and if it's not Philly, if it's the Miami fucking Heat, I'm not going to crash.
It might be Toronto.
I've actually been Zen maxing. He likes Toronto, and he likes the Heat. So, Logan, let's just give it back to you. Who's in your 9 spot?
I brought out something special for you guys today. It's been
yeah.
a long time coming. For those who are listening, I have a bin. And I've had a bin in which the Philadelphia 76ers have been sitting for a very long time, and I had to get this out, and I had to take Philly out of the bin. I had no other choice. They tied my hands. Luka Doncic said, "My leg!" And I said, oh shit.
My God.
I got to get the bin, man. I got to get Philly
out.
out.
It's so beautiful. It's so glorious. What have we thought about all year, Logan? Nothing. We end up on the same side, and you're going to be on the right side of history.
This reminded me of the Bills incident from the regular season when I was like, the Bills are trash, and then I took them to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, well, that didn't work out, so let's not compare it to that.
That didn't. They were close. I still think never mind. We're not going to get into
let's not
NFL
revisit
talk
that
right
game. Please, let's not do that. Let's just talk about the Sixers. You are loving the Sixers, and I love that.
Here was my hang-up. So with Charlotte, I don't really believe in the defense enough. I really think the clutch offense is going to get them. Like, I don't believe them to generate enough in the clutch moments of games. As skeptical as I've been about Joel Embiid's health, and don't get me wrong, I have not moved off of that fundamental point. I'm still very skeptical about his availability potential in a playoff run. When I get down to it, I think about some of the core limitations of a team that I'm actually decently high on in the New York Knicks, where I could see them actually going on a flukish run despite their limitations. I kind of come back to Philadelphia, and I'm like, damn, if I think the Knicks can go on a run, I probably think Philly can, where a lot of the hang-ups that I have about New York with the defense and the point-of-attack guys, I could see Philly doing it. And Embiid has been at a stupid high enough level where I'll be clear about something. I am certain that Embiid will not play in every game of a single series. But say a series goes 6 or 7 games, if they can squeeze enough juice out of the supporting cast to steal a game or two, and Embiid is available for a crucial game 6 or 7, that could swing the tide where he goes off and just decimates a team with his mid-range and three-point jump shooting, where Maxey is killing a team's point-of-attack defense and getting anything he wants, where the surrounding pieces are shooting and defending at a high enough level. Philly's good. My hang-up with Philly has never been how good the team is. It has been Joel Embiid's availability. And with the Lakers out, yeah, I had to pencil in another team here, and I just prefer Philadelphia to a team like Charlotte. That's my thing, where their star power to me overwhelms Charlotte's totality of offense. And it's really kind of the point that you guys are making with the regular season versus playoff difference, where over an 82-game season, I would probably rather bank on Charlotte's offense being better. But when we're going into the playoffs, I do bank on the top two. So I want to be clear here. I'm not putting Philly in the top, 6 teams. I don't think they're going on a run.
Them. You love the freaking Sixers, man. It's okay to say it. You love them.
I'm a Sixers fanboy. I love Philadelphia. They're my favorite team in basketball.
And Joel Embiid.
And my favorite player, Paul George, who shoots an awesome podcast. They're gonna do it this year. Yeah.
Friend of the show, industry man, Paul George.
To all the Philly fans, you guys are finally out of the bin.
Let's go, dude. This is wonderful. I also have Philly in my 9th spot, and I've been fighting against the freaking brick wall all year over here, this Camden character. Like, I have been a Sixers optimist pretty much since the moment that we saw Joel Embiid look like the player who he's been. Like, I think I've had them in my 9 or 10 contender spot for the last several times that we've done this, and I've just been waiting for it to all come together. And like, it is still somewhat theoretical, even though Philly has been playing really well when Embiid is on the floor. Like, we've only seen Embiid on the floor so much, but I'm going to go into the same numbers that I have. 18-7 in Embiid's last 25 games, in which he is averaging 30 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists on 62% true shooting. Like, the level that he is at offensively, even as he is physically a shell of what he once was, is just so damn imposing. And I really, really, really think you do not want to run into Maxey and Embiid in a playoff series. That is one of the scariest offensive duos in the NBA. If we're comparing them to like a Houston, both of those players scare me more in a playoff series than anybody on the Rockets roster, even KD, because there's just a difference in terms of the volume that these guys can generate. I mean, Embiid, with the shot making, the ability to still get to the line 10 times a game, he can just have these scoring explosions. And then Maxey, it's like, can carve you up with the speed downhill, with the crazy volume pull-up shooting. And so I just think you have two players who can truly take over a game offensively. That's a scary thing. And now Paul George, the PEDs haven't worn off, man. I mean, he needed a break, whatever it is. Like, this is the best he has looked easily in Philadelphia. In his 8 games since returning, he's averaging 23, 6, and 4 on 61% true shooting. And like, for the first time, looks like a real legit offensive third option. And so you put together the totally imposing individual scoring of Maxey and Embiid, a bit of the two-man game with them, with the elite shooting of a Paul George and some of the secondary ball handling and playmaking that he brings, playing off of those two, and then VJ and the speed and the rim pressure and the solid shooting and playmaking from him, and a couple wings who I think are like solid two-way players, Oubre and Quentin Grimes. Like, obviously this is super contingent upon Embiid holding up over a 7-game series and looking good, but he's just looked awesome offensively when he's been available for so long now, and they need their spot-up guys to shoot decently well, but I think they can do that. Like, they've got a lot of pretty average three-point shooters here. If it's Oubre, if it's Edgecombe, if it's even Grimes, like guys who can be up and down, but I feel solid about that. And like, the spacing at least is very solid here. Those guys generally keep teams honest, more or less. So I think Philly just flat out is an awesome offense when their guys are healthy. And when Maxey and Embiid have shared the floor, I mean, they have been. They've got a 122 plus offensive rating. My concerns with this team are really about the defense, where I think they're fine. Like, I like them more than Charlotte because I think they clearly have more plus defenders. They have more perimeter length and athleticism and whatnot. And, like, honestly, like, several wings who you feel pretty good about as, like, on-ball defenders. PG and Oubre and Grimes and VJ can hold his own. And Maxey, for being a smaller guard, like, is pretty solid defensively. I do worry, though, about Embiid's defensive rigidity. He is a terrible transition defender at this point. His defensive mobility is completely shot. He is like a straight drop, low effort sort of defensive big. So I think they are very susceptible to defensive breakdowns because of that, where it's like you can attack Embiid if you put them in rotation. Like, Embiid just can't cover ground defensively. But they have enough that is like solid to good around him, where I think we're talking about a potential elite playoff offense, like top 10 level, and a solid defense. And then when we talk about like what these big games come down to, again, if you're telling me, all right, you got to pick a duo to go out there and out-duel the rest of the best in crunch time, like Maxey and Embiid are towards the top of that list. They are both an absolute handful to deal with in the half court, creating their own shot. So I'm high on the Sixers. I've been high on the Sixers all year. Tyler, are we a little bit too high? Are you going to push back on some of this stuff?
No, you kind of sold me, and you kind of covered everything that was in my head, right? Like the main concern I go to with Philly is the defense, and specifically with Embiid, like you talked about. He's just so vulnerable in space at this point. Like against pick and rolls, he's dropping back 16 feet. He can't really cover ground at all just because the mobility, like you said, is completely shot. And I don't know what that looks like in the playoffs. I think against certain teams, like against Detroit, I don't think it's as much of a problem until you start running a lot more stuff through Duncan Robinson. Then it's like Embiid probably needs to get up to the level, get up to the touch, and then he can't recover, and that causes breakdowns. But I'm also thinking, like, we were talking about the impossibility of guarding Charlotte. Imagine Philly trying to guard Charlotte. It would be an absolute nightmare. And I'm just like if that's a play-in matchup, I would pick Charlotte pretty easily.
But how is Charlotte going to guard Philly? Like, Joel Embiid is their nightmare.
They aren't, but I was going to say, my one kind of hang-up with Philly is they don't really have any high-end passers when you talk about the offense. So I do think maybe, against Charlotte, this isn't a problem, but where we talked about Charlotte's lack of ability to beat switches or beat mismatches being a problem, I think Philly's problem is once teams get into those aggressive gaps and start shelling up, they're not going to be able to get the ball where it needs to go to really exploit high-pressure type of points. And then maybe they start turning the ball over a bit more. And then, like you said, the transition defense can be a problem. And I can just as easily see Philly hitting their ceiling as I can see it collapsing in on itself. And it's just like they go up against Boston and look terrible. The thing that's tough for me with Philly is with all of these other teams, we have a great sample of their teams playing together. And like we can look at statistical indicators like their turnover percentage against top 10 teams or their offensive rebounding against top 10 teams, their half court offense and defense. We can't do that with Philly because their team has barely been together. Paul George was suspended. Joel Embiid's been in and out. I just don't know what to do with Philly. They're the biggest question mark to me because I just don't know what to expect from them. I like the idea of betting on the high end talent of like when Paul George's shot making is working. Tyrese Maxey's kind of just like automatic paint touch ability. VJ Edgecombe and Maxey being one of the most athletic backcourts in basketball. Joel Embiid just demanding so much attention in the middle of the floor and spraying it out to guys who, like you said, maybe aren't high-end three-point shooters, but are reliable enough to get hot. Like Quentin Grimes, I could see getting hot for one or two playoff games. I also like the type of looks they can go to without Embiid, where you've got a Dembona or Drummond, and you can start dominating the glass, and you can get a little bit more aggressive with your defense. So Philly, to me, has a little bit of versatility to them on both sides of the ball. They've got the athleticism argument. They've got the high-end shot-making talent argument. I can't buy them over Charlotte, but I am more willing to get them over Houston at this point, just because of what we talked about again with Houston. Just there's no possibility of a run there unless everybody gets hurt. And with Philly, it's like, yes, you need luck on your side with your own injuries. You need Embiid to be healthy. You need Paul George to be healthy. But if everything goes right, there is a higher ceiling with a best-case scenario for me. In Philly. So if we're just going for the long shot title run, like I said, I'm going to throw Philly at my 10 spot and Charlotte at my 9.
I love it. Like, and that's been the sales pitch with Philly on this list all year, right? And we've had to reiterate this. I think it's pretty obvious now that, like, we're into the playoffs, so it's just whose upside do you believe in most? But we haven't been doing power rankings. It's not who's playing best at this moment. It's not who's safest. It's like who's got the upside to make a run. Philly is an upside team, and I think we have seen that upside click when they've been healthy, but we also just haven't seen them healthy much. So like you said, they are absolutely more of an unknown. But when I think about them in, like, the Knicks matchup, I'm like, that series to me feels like essentially a toss-up because I do not think the Knicks can guard Joel Embiid with their starting five. Like, that's for sure. And then if you get Mitchell Robinson into foul trouble, you take him out of the game. And I think Embiid can just destroy them like he did in 2024. Like, he's playing awesome. So I understand he's not quite the player he was then, but that was also him with Bell's palsy and, like, coming off of a torn meniscus. So he was not 100% at all, and he still cooked them. I don't think they can really guard Maxey. Like, as good as OG is, that sort of perimeter speed, shiftiness is not the matchup that he's built for. And then I look at the other side and I'm like, they can at least throw a shit ton of long ass wings at a Jalen Brunson, which are the exact sort of players he struggles more so to score over. And so there's just a lot of little things in the matchup there where I really believe in Philly's offense, and I think they can be functional enough defensively, although I do have a couple concerns there. But yeah, I mean, the speed of the backcourt, the size, length, decent shooting they have on the wings, plus Embiid operating in the middle, just like obliterating teams. I think it's really scary. I think they have the potential to be a really, really good high upside team. So with that being said, Tyler, let's go to your 8th spot now. Who do you have there?
You teased it a little bit. My 8th spot is the Knicks. They're a really weird team because you look at, like, going into the playoffs last year, I felt way better about them. And this year, they've technically been a much better team. Like, their net rating with Brunson on the court is like 3 points better than it was last year. And it's like, what's going on? I don't know why I feel so, like, so much less confident in their ability to win a playoff series, or win 2 playoff series. Sorry. But it's weird because, like, I see the angle of they can get defensive lineups on the court around Brunson or around Cat. Like, if you get Deuce McBride at the 2, you get Mitchell Robinson on the court. You've got OG and McHale, who we know are going to notch it up a level in the in the playoffs on defense. But and then I think you could just always, like, you have this back pocket option of let's go Brunson ball. And it's like, we know that works in the playoffs against most defenses. We know if you go Brunson ball and space the floor, it's really tough to stop them, especially in late game situations. And they've actually had an insane clutch net rating this season for that exact reason. Obviously, clutch can be a little bit fluky, but the problem I have is that their starting 5 does not work. It just is not a good lineup. We're working with over 2,000 minutes since last season where the Knicks have a negative net rating with their starting 5 on the court. And so it's like, you have to get creative with your closing lineups because it feels like they're not going to waver off of the starting 5. And there's just drawbacks of getting anyone on the floor. Like, if you get Deuce McBride out there, now you're kind of undersized, and also that you don't have as much secondary. Like, the one thing you do get with Josh Hart, besides the rebounding and besides a little bit of defensive pressure, is you get his connectivity on offense, his ability to set stuff up and diversify the attack as an initiator. You don't get that as much with Deuce McBride. You don't get as much of, like, the short roll utility when he's screening for Brunson.
Right.
And then if you get Mitchell Robinson on the court, not only do you get, like, lose your spacing, you get a guy who we've seen playoff defenses are just going to foul him. Like, get him in the bonus, make Mitchell Robinson go to the free throw line, get him off the court. And I don't know about closing close playoff games with Mitchell Robinson on the court. I feel like it kind of just clogs up everything, and you kind of need him out there for your defense, for your rebounding. So it's really weird. New York's had the superpower all year where they just dominate teams on the glass, especially defensively. They're just a monster team on the glass. And they're one of those teams I look at, and it's like, if you take them off the glass, where do they win on the margins? And then I think about the fact that you can go to Brunson ball, and now you're not going to turn the ball over, and you have a lot of shooters, so you can still have a high-level half-court offense against basically any defense. I do this constant back and forth with New York, where it's like, I see reasons to be high on them, I see reasons to be low on them. I don't know what to make of it, so I kind of just throw them here, where it's like, I think the other teams in the East I trust a little bit more, but I also wouldn't be surprised if New York, to me, there is a tier jump here, though. Like, I do think from the tier I just talked about with Charlotte, Houston, Philly, the Clippers, I do think New York's a step above those teams, but I also don't know if they get to the level of the teams that I'm going to have right above them. So they're kind of just slotted in as this, like, locked in number 8 for me.
This is where I have the Knicks too, and they are a weird team, right? When you have, and we talk about this all the time, when you have two flawed stars that you're building a team around, you're always going to be doing this balancing act of trying to cover up for them. Jalen Brunson, his defense, and needing to have slanted guys in that way, and same thing for Cat. I think there's a very good chance that the Knicks could go back to the Eastern Conference Finals again, though, this year, even though I have them in this 8 spot. Like, you see how the East is shaping up, and I think they probably just big dog the Raptors in the playoffs. I think there's a big talent kind of gap. As much as a fan of the Raptors as I am and a staunch supporter.
I don't think you need to explain that one.
I just shout out Toronto, man. Everybody wants to shit on the Raptors. They've been balling this year, man. Shout out.
No, I was going to say, I actually am like higher on Toronto than most people. I don't think that's a shoo-in. I think Toronto could give them a lot of problems.
They're a really, really good defense, and they've got a lot of length and athleticism, and that could give them some trouble for sure.
And they have like,
they have their
offense. The variability of their offense, though, is like, I wouldn't be surprised. It's the same kind of thing we're talking about where you have to kind of get lucky, but if Brandon Ingram just has a 55% from mid-range series, it's like, well, that kind of drags you out of the mud in that regard.
True.
They also are a really good transition offense, like a really good transition offense. And they dominate the turnover margins. They're like, I think they're number 1 in the league in transition differential and number 2 or 3 in turnover differential. They have like, they're a rare breed of team that's a top tier transition offense, like number 1 or number 2, and then also a number 1 or 2 transition defense. And that's
they're OKC.
rare. Like,
they're OKC light.
They're OKC light. You said it, not me. No, but I do think I would pick New York in that series, but I do think Toronto's a really interesting team, and I can't wait to see them in the playoffs.
Yeah, I like Toronto a lot. Honestly, Brunson is kind of the guy that just pushes the Knicks over the edge where the offense is going to be so easy, but you just can't write off the Knicks. They're top 5 offense this year. They've been a top 10 defense, and like we can point out all the flaws. They went to the conference finals last year. I think if they get out of that first round series against Toronto, which I would pick them in 5 or 6, and then the second round matchup, I think they could knock off Cleveland too. Like, I wouldn't write off that possibility. I would take Cleveland.
They're not facing Cleveland.
It'll be Boston if they make the second round. But it's weird because like they did beat Boston last year with basically the exact same roster.
The weirdest playoff series of all time. But I do think Boston is somehow even better than last year.
They are.
Like, and specifically in that matchup, like, I just think with this year's offense, they're not going to run into, like, the worst of their tendencies that they did last year. It's like, okay, if just pressing the Brown-Tatum mismatch stack button over and over again, and, like, those guys are just missing shots over the top, it's like, all right, we have more stuff we can go to. Like, Peyton Pritchard is more proven as a creator. We have more stuff in the pick and roll. We create more margin on the offensive glass, and we have all of the same shooting, and we have all of the same Tatum and Brown buttons to push, and, like, I just think it's insane how badly Boston approached that series. And when you look at how Indiana carved up that Knicks defense the very next series, like, it was damning for Boston, but I really, really, really do not think that would happen this time around. But also, I really didn't think it would happen the first time around. I was going to say that the Celtics
didn't even
were
give
win,
them.
And they didn't.
I didn't even give them a fighter's chance to win that series.
Yeah.
I was like, they were 4-0 against them in the regular season, and they blew them out 3 times. I was like, this is a shoe-in. Boston's advancing. But also, that's kind of the Knicks superpower, where it's like, if you get in close games, Jalen Brunson is one of the most reliable offensive players we've ever seen. Just his ability to impose himself on games as an inside-the-arc scorer, as a pull-up jump shooting threat, as a playmaker who's not going to turn the ball over.
I mean, for the playoffs, you can say what you want about efficiency. The guy's been like 30-6 consistently every single playoff run.
And it's like, there is so much that goes into being able to ramp up that level of volume and do it against any defense. Like we talked about teams that are going to try and switch, teams that are going to try and put 2 on the ball. Like he was staring down Boston's best defenders, like Drew Holiday, Derek White, Tatum or Brown, and it was like, hold these buckets in the fourth quarter. So I do think that is the variable you always have to worry about with New York. But yeah, like you guys have both talked about, there's just so many limitations there.
And I do think that's my hang up with the Knicks is when we get deeper than that. And again, this could be matchup dependent, but Boston, I do look at that as an advantage where I hate doubting Jalen Brunson because he is so proven, but like it's those 2 matchups. And then like if we got to a Detroit, that's where I really think the point of attack guys, they have so many guys they could throw to Jalen Brunson to limit his value. And also the soft quotient. And look, again, shout out the Knicks, man. Shout out them for playing defense so great end to end this year. the Detroit matchup is where I think the physicality would overwhelm them as well. And, like, I can be critical about the offense. I think that's where the Knicks kind of get moved around and bitched a little bit. But, yeah, this feels like the spot. I couldn't completely write off another run because the Knicks are so talented. Like, I do think it's on the table. But kind of like you've been saying about some of these teams in this tier, I think Lady Luck would have to be on the Knicks side, and some things would have to, go their way. If it's somebody going down, getting injured, if it's a team getting upset. But this is kind of where the Knicks, I feel like, have been all year for us,
Yeah, totally. Like, it's just hard for me to buy into this team more than this with, like, the fatal flaw that I do think they have defensively, and I understand, like, they're a top 8 defense statistically. I just don't buy it. Like, I think having two liabilities as glaring as Brunson and Cat is always going to be more of a problem in the playoffs against very smart offenses. They had a 119 defensive rating in the playoffs last year when those two shared the court. Like, that's just untenable. And then you have, like you said, the struggles in their starting five. Like, there's just some core incompatibilities with how this team is built that I really can't get over. And then the offense, like, is awesome, but it's still not a top 5 playoff offense to me, because I do think as good as Brunson's playoff scoring consistently is, they're so reliant on him, like maybe a tad bit less this year than in years previous, but it's still that same fundamental formula. And I value his volume so much and the consistency and the clutch stuff, but there is still an efficiency ceiling with him where, like, the efficiency is pretty consistently middling. And he's also been in, like, this weird kind of down stretch offensively in, like, the second half of this year. Since January 1st, he's literally a 23 point per game scorer on 56% true shooting. Like, he's not doing the usual Jalen Brunson stuff. I think he gets a +5 boost when you get to the playoffs, or, like, honestly, more so just maintains when you get to the playoffs, which is really the measure of a great playoff scorer. But with the massive load on his plate and how he has struggled in some of these key matchups in the East, like, Detroit clamped him this year, and Detroit destroyed the Knicks. And, like, I don't see that changing. Asar Thompson, for my money, is the best Jalen Brunson defender in the NBA. And then it's like Boston. Yes, he always has the ability to just work his way to his spot and, like, make a 15-footer over top. But he's really got to live off of that, I think, against some of these teams. Boston has a lot of good, long defenders they can throw at him. Cleveland, he shot like 33% against this year, and they have a couple of guys who I think that they can throw at him, although there's also a couple dudes who he can attack, a couple of weak links in that defense. But overall, just him not being his best against some of these other top teams in the East, my concerns about the playoff defense. This team does have better depth than last year, but then it's like, how much is Jose Alvarado actually playing for you in the playoffs? I've liked Landry Shamet's minutes, but it's like, how much are you going to lean on him for the shooting value? You talked about some of the questions and pitfalls of being overly reliant on Mitchell Robinson. It's just too much weirdness for me to be higher on them than this. But I do think, like, what Brunson is offensively for the most part, and this team is going to be a really good offense. I just think the defense is less reliable, and I don't trust Cat's playoff offense. I think Cat, against teams that can pose really any sort of physical problems for him, he can get pushed into some really bad tendencies of playing out of control and lots of offensive fouls. And he's not a mismatch attacking big, so there's some vulnerability maybe to switching in that regard. And, like, teams that can put a big forward on him and maybe use a center to roam off of, like, a Josh Hart in those lineups. Like, I just see a lot of playoff flaws with the Knicks.
And specifically, kind of like what Tyler mentioned earlier with the Knicks, too, one of their big advantages is on the glass. And I feel like when we're getting into these really competitive battles against the top teams in the East, specifically Detroit and Boston, those are also really good rebounding teams that I feel like negate one of their big advantages and helps shrink the margin even more for the Knicks. I do feel like, and I don't want to get too much into these talks either, kind of like we were talking about with Houston, I feel like this offseason, if it doesn't work, if they don't get back to the conference finals, if they don't go on an actual run past the second round, I feel like this is the offseason where the Knicks are probably going to have to make another big decision and shuffle some things up.
I know, but it's so hard when you're paying Cat $60 million and nobody else is going to want to pay Cat $60 million.
You probably have
all
to attach
out of draft assets.
Yeah.
Spent all those on Mikal Bridges, more or less. So It's tough. I really think they are locked into this core, at least for now, that just like is going to win 50 games because of the talent that they have, but just not built for the playoffs as I see them.
I'd like to give the Knicks a continuity edge or something like that, but I really don't think it matters all that much when we're talking about some of these matchup-specific limitations.
Yeah. And it's like, how much does continuity matter when your starting five, despite all the continuity, has still not been good? And when it's like,
say it's bad continuity. You're just continuing to be average with your starting
I just mean
five.
they have literally more experience than a lot of these other teams in the East. Like, they've just played more basketball together.
Going back to college for some of these guys.
True.
And it just hasn't been able to overcome some of the roster limitations that they do have. So we all agree on the Knicks in the 8 spot. That's kind of funny. Tyler, back to you for your 7 spot.
Yeah, this is, again, to me, I feel like this is a jump up from the Knicks. I've got Cleveland at my 7 spot. I was a bit higher on them at first, but as I kind of think about, there are a lot of question marks with this Cleveland roster still, and I think it mostly relates to how they match up against the top 2 teams in the East. So I was kind of running through a scenario in my head earlier where I was like, well, let's assume the second round matchup is Cleveland versus Detroit for a second. You run into a situation where Detroit being able to deploy Cade as a primary point of attack defender is so valuable. And you could just put him on, let's put Cade on Harden, for example, and then let's put Asar on Donovan Mitchell. You already have 2 great on-ball defenders. But then we're going to 1-5 switch everything. And it's like, let's get Duren out on Harden. And Cade is perfectly fine against either Mobley or Allen. That's not really a mismatch. Yeah. He's big enough to do that. And now it's like, James Harden, go beat us in isolation. And that's where you get the volatility we've seen every year in the playoffs, where if the 3-point shot, the pull-up 3-point shot is working, he can get red hot and drop a 40-point playoff game. But if it's falling, the lows are so low. And then it's like James Harden kind of disappears from some of these playoff games because he isn't able to get those easy pick and roll opportunities. And I think both Detroit and Boston can completely take away the lob, just completely neutralize the lob. And it's very similar to what we saw Boston do against Dallas with Luka Doncic in the finals, where it's like, if you neutralize the lob, now your 2 ball handlers just have to go over the top of the defense consistently, or you have to rely on shooters. And I do think one of Cleveland's superpowers is that they can go to very good 3-point shooting lineups, like Sam Merrill, Jalen Tyson, Max Strus. These are world-class 3-point shooting talents that you can put around Harden and Mitchell. So if you do start to switch, I do think Harden and Mitchell can both consistently get around their defender, and then you can start to spray it out to shooters that way. But then it's like, to get those shooting lineups on the court, what happens on the other side of the ball? Now you have 4 small players to attack. You have 2 guys who can't stay in front of the ball consistently. And then you look at a team like Detroit and their ability to overwhelm teams with size and get on the offensive glass. Cleveland's actually a really bad rebounding team in comparison to what we talked about with New York. They're the exact opposite. They just do not rebound well against basically anyone. And it's like, yeah, Mobley and Allen can really help out in the paint. But if you have to, a lot of times in the playoffs, one or the other has to be on the court for your offense to function. And if you have both on the court, then you lose that spacing variable. And I just think Cleveland struggles with the ability to cover 3 boxes in one lineup, where I think you can go to an elite half-court offensive lineup that then doesn't have an elite half-court defense. You can go to an elite 3-point shooting lineup that then doesn't have the size to rebound or protect the rim. And that inability to construct an elite 2-way lineup that you have good defenders on the court, you have good shooters on the court, you have size on the court, I think that's ultimately going to be their downfall against any of the other great teams in the East. And I look at the 6 teams I have ahead of them, I don't think you run into that issue with any of them. So that's why I have Cleveland at my 7 spot, acknowledging that their offensive ceiling is so high. They do have a lot of great defenders. Their inability to construct one elite 2-way lineup that's also big and athletic, to me, is their kind of big downfall.
What about the Keon Ellis, Jalen Tyson wing tandem? Does that not check enough boxes on both sides of the ball with then honestly kind of whatever combination you want around that? Like, let's say 1 guard, you could go double big with that look, or you could go 1 big, and then it's like we can go multiple different ways. We can go Max Strus for the offense, we can go Dean Wade for the defense and size. Like, I see what you're saying, but my God, they have so many different lineup combinations that, like, I do think there's a way to find that really balanced 2-way look, and then they can go more defensive, and then they can go, I mean, the offensive ceiling, like you're saying, is ridiculous. The combination of multiple creators, multiple play finishing bigs, and like so many elite spot up shooters they have is insane. But like, I'm pretty high on Keon Ellis, Jalen Tyson playoff minutes. I think those are 225+ minute per game playoff guys for you who are going to be like tying together a lot of these lineups with the two-way solidness where some of these other guys are more slanted to one side of the ball.
That's where we differ, I think. I was high on Keon Ellis for a while now, but I'm kind of coming around. I think he might be a little gimmicky for a few reasons. I think one, he's the lightest player in the NBA. He's like 155 pounds.
He's small. Yeah.
So you go up against these teams like Detroit and Boston, or even Jalen Brunson. I don't think he can guard any of the top options. So you're kind of relying on him to be a roamer at that point and more of a defensive playmaker who's going to force turnovers. And it's like in those spots, he can be very undisciplined, very gamble heavy. So you get like 8 stocks, but there was also so many plays where he lost a backdoor cutter or he made a poor judgment on a double team. He's not a rim protector at all. So if you get him behind the play, again, you're just relying on him to try and force turnovers. And then offensively, he can't do anything off the catch. It's all just 3-point shooting. It's like if you start to run him off the line, you start to close out hard. He doesn't have a mid-range game. He's not a great finisher. He's not a great passer. So you're kind of just relying on him getting those open threes. And I do think, again, when we talk about the top teams in the East, I think they can play him off the floor because their rotation ability on defense is so good to where he's not going to get open threes. And then defensively, he's just too weak to guard any of the top guys, and then you lose the advantage that you get with having one of your bigs on the court for size, or one of your better offensive players in the court, like Sam Merrill, who's a great shooter but also more dynamic in off the catch situations and in screen situations. I do buy the Jalen Tyson hype. I do think he'll be a really good playoff player, but Keon Ellis to me might be a gimmick, and I feel like Kenny Atkinson hasn't realized that yet, and he might start closing games with him.
I'm not talking about closing games with him because I think that Tyson is a substantially better player, but I do think like there's a combination of defensive chaos agent plus pretty high level spot up 3-point shooter with Keon that I do like and I do think can be valuable. But I think kind of the core challenge with Cleveland is going to be non-big size and strength. Like, obviously, they have the double big look, and then you go down the rest of the roster, and it's like we have Dean Wade, who's like a legit 6'9", and then pretty quickly, it's like everybody is 6'6" or shorter. I do like Keon, but I do agree that his slightness is a playoff issue. And then if you look at how much the defense has struggled in the Harden-Mitchell minutes, like, my hope was, okay, Harden's size, his ability to at least be a functional part of a team defense is going to be, like, meaningful for this team where he's still a negative defender, but they are a noticeably better defense with him than they were with Garland because Garland was such a red flag. And it's kind of still been like, no, your defensive backcourt is lackluster. And so I do think those are issues. Maybe I'm more concerned about Detroit's offense than you are, maybe specifically in this matchup, because I'm not joking. I mean, I'm a Jalen Tyson propagandist as a Cal basketball fan. I absolutely love the guy. I also think like he's such a well-rounded wing. When you talk about a guy who is a lights-out catch and shooter, but also actually can put the ball on the floor, can make plays for others, solid connective passer, and then defensively has the size and the strength to where he is one of the best Cade Cunningham defenders in the NBA. Like, Jalen Tyson was built in a lab to guard Cade Cunningham. He has the size, the measurables to like mirror him, absorb the bump, still get a good closeout on all this mid-range stuff. So Cade has struggled mightily against the Cavs. I think he's literally shooting like low 30s in terms of percentage in that matchup. So I think there's a real world where the Detroit offense breaks down against the Cavs. And then even though I agree Detroit has some good counters for what the Cavs offense does, like I still trust the Cavs offense a lot more. And I just think they have way more firepower and weaponry and creators and play finishers and shooters. Like literally they have more of everything offensively than Detroit.
I was going to say, so Detroit versus Cleveland was the battle I had in my head. And the more I think about this specific matchup, the more I just don't know if there's a real scenario Cleveland beats Detroit without getting absolutely hot between their two best players. Because I'm thinking about, I already explained like some of the defensive issues, and it's like the size, the defensive issues that Detroit's defense arises for Cleveland's offense with their switchability, with their rebounding, with the fact that they have multiple rim protectors at every position. The reason I lean towards Detroit is I think they have that ability to switch between lineups that do cover every base, where it's like Danish Jenkins developing as a secondary ball handler who can legitimately run an offense without Cade or play off the catch next to Cade and be a somewhat reliable three-point shooter just opens up the door for so much possibility. And then also Kevin Huerter, his three-point shot has just disappeared, but he can be a legit like option in dribble handoff situations. He puts pressure on the rim. He's actually a really good finisher in the paint, and he's a pretty good extra passer, so you can unlock Duren that way. I think you have a little bit more offensive variety than last year if you look at Detroit. But then also those lineups can still be very good defensively. Like if you have a lineup out there of Cade, Duncan Robinson, Danish Jenkins, Asar, and Duren, you're elite on both sides of the ball, I think. And I look at, yes, Mitchell's ability to, or Mitchell or Harden, you start to attack Duncan Robinson or Danish Jenkins, get them in the primary action.
Yeah.
Jalen Duren's still going to be at the rim. Asar Thompson's still going to be at the rim. Cade's still going to be at the nail. Like, their ability to shell up and their rotation ability, their defense is so good. Like, they're close to OKC in basically every defensive metric this season. They're that awesome, good defensively.
But it's like you're saying, if you can't contain the ball against Harden and Mitchell, which is very hard to do. Like, Harden is much more lethal as a playmaker at this point. So if you're having to overhelp on him and now he's creating wide open threes for Sam Merrill and Jalen Tyson, those are 45% three-point shooters. Max Strus, we cannot forget the almighty Max Strus is back now. I just think I'm higher on Cleveland's offense, although I think you have beautifully laid out everything that Detroit can do to them, and I completely agree with you. Switching 1 through 5, like, what you can't undersell about what Harden has done for the Cavs offense is Mobley and Allen eating. Jared Allen is a different player with James Harden than he is without him. Like, he literally averages 18 and 10 on 72% true shooting with Harden. And Mobley, even though he's had all the same yips at the free throw line, which I'm legitimately worried about. I think there's a world where we see Hacka Mobley in the playoffs. Like, it's been so bad from the free throw line, but also the three-point shooting, like hovering around 30%. But he has been much more aggressive and efficient around the rim. Part of that is to his own credit. Part of that is also to the credit of playing with James Harden. So if you can limit that, if you can limit the lobs and some of the interior passes, that's definitely meaningful. But there's still a lot of paths to really good offense for Cleveland. I just think they check a lot of boxes for me in terms of playoff success. And I do value half-court offense so much. And they're the half-court offense. They're the offense I believe in the third most in the NBA. I would only take Denver and Boston above them. Logan, where do you come down on all this?
Originally, I'm not going to lie, when I came into this, I thought that I was going to go with the Pistons under the Cavs just because of my concern with Cade's injury. But I'm thinking about what I value going into the playoffs and some of these limitations of Cleveland, and I actually think there's a – and I don't know if I should be doing this head-to-head or if I should be going with the team that I think is more impervious to matchup. That being said, I think I lean on Detroit in both of those scenarios for a few reasons, and it's specifically this power versus finesse dynamic with Cleveland and Detroit. And I can see both of these teams having strength, where I could see Detroit's shooting limitations really melting their half-court offense to a point where, you know, they get beaten by a team that can just put the ball in the basket more easily from the perimeter. And Cleveland really does have this super high play finishing angle where you're talking about Harden enhancing Allen and Mobley to this really elite level and having all these awesome play finishers in Sam Merrill and Tyson and these just shooters that could burn your face off in a playoff series. I'm going to go with Detroit ahead of Cleveland for a few reasons. And it's specifically that roster imbalance that you guys are talking about where Cleveland has to address that this offseason. And I don't know if it's moving one of these bigs to get more depth in other areas. They don't have big wings or big centers throughout the roster beneath Wade, Mobley, Allen. Whereas I go to a Detroit, I have Beef Stew. I have Paul Reed, and, like, you can laugh at guys like that, but they have a Ron Holland, and you can goof and go, those guys aren't that skilled. I can put in, kind of like what Tyler's saying, any lineup I go to, I'm eating on the glass. And I think that advantage, and I've mentioned this throughout the year with Detroit, they're also the best point in the paint margin team throughout the season in terms of limiting team scoring on the interior and also getting their own on the interior. And I think I'm just going to lean on that. I'm going to lean on the power. I'm going to lean on the strength. I'm going to lean on the physicality. And a big reason of that is the fact that Cade has been injured, and this team has continued to rattle off win after win with Dennis Jenkins running the offense. So I've just seen Detroit be less adverse to circumstances, and I think I'm going to lean on their strength and power and advantage on the interior translating to the playoffs. So I have my concerns and criticisms with both of these teams, but I think I'm going to lean on the more physically imposing team going into the playoffs.
Yeah, Detroit's offensive limitations are real. Their half-court offensive limitations are real. Their lack of spacing in certain lineups is real. But I don't think Cleveland has the facilities to exploit that to the degree that like a Boston does. And it comes down to one impossible question, right? Like Carson brought up the issue of if you start switching and Harden and Mitchell are able to beat their mismatches, you have to leave a shooter. But if Allen and Mobley are on the court together, you don't, right? Like you can pack the paint and you don't have to do that. And then you could easily counter and say, well, let's just run one big and let's put Jalen Tyson at the 4 or whoever at the 4. But then you will not be able to stop Detroit from absolutely pummeling you in the paint and on the offensive glass on the other side of the ball. And then you lose everything that becomes an advantage because Detroit's half-court offense is no longer an issue. You're just going to get to the paint and dominate the offensive glass so easily against Cleveland's one big lineups because they're bad at rebounding with both bigs on the court. What'll that look like? Dean Wade can't even rebound, and he's 6'9".
That's true.
So it's like there's. I look at it, I'm like, what's stopping Asar Thompson in the series from grabbing 4 offensive rebounds a game? Or what's stopping Duren from just averaging 25 points a game?
Okay, but let me pose the opposite angle of what's stopping the Cavs from saying, okay, we'll go double big and we will have Mobley roaming off of Asar all game. Like, that could fuck up the Detroit offense,
It could.
man.
It could, but I think the counter there would be I also think then that would mess up Cleveland's offense because Detroit can pack the paint and switch, and then it becomes a defensive grinded out series, and I think Detroit gets more easy stuff. They destroy in transition.
I think
they force more turnovers than any team in the league.
Half-court offensive talent difference is real, man. Like,
but couldn't you just
saying?
So
I just need dudes to create. I'm banking on the Cavs.
It is. But I also think you're asking Detroit to create. You're asking Cleveland to create against Detroit's defense, which is very different than Detroit trying to create against Cleveland's defense. And actually, Detroit's had a better half-court offense against top 10 defenses this year. They have the 5th best half-court offense against top 10 defenses.
Are you not worried about Cade shooting tordates consistently in this matchup? Are you not worried about Jalen Tyson being the Cade
That's
stopper?
what I'm saying. I think Cade would shoot tour dates, and I don't think it would matter because they're going to dominate the offensive glass. And I think Jalen Duren variable is so interesting here. He's actually just unbelievable.
Yeah, and can I just say this? I mean, Logan, you were touching on it. My biggest concern with Cleveland, and this is interrelated with like the smallness of the lineups and some of the defensive questions, but like fundamentally it's toughness pretty much. And like Detroit is as tough and as physical as they come, like probably the toughest, most physical team in the NBA. And it's like Mobley can be made uncomfortable by that. Jared Allen can be sort of taken out of a game against a guy like Duren. Like sometimes he just gets fucking mogged in like that physicality rebounding battle. James Harden, what's the thing that is going to wear him down over the course of a series? It's perimeter physicality, right? And athleticism. So that is my concern. And I don't want to beat a dead horse here. I'm just more worried about the Detroit offense, I think, than either of you guys are. I think there are some major red flag offensive players who they need to play a lot. I do not think Asar Thompson is a functional offensive half-court player in a playoff series. I do not think that Ron Holland is. I mean, Ron Holland even more so.
Don't get me wrong. Asar's not a reliable shooter, but I do think Asar carves out and finds his value in other ways. And like
he does, and he did it against the Knicks last year. Transition, offensive rebounding,
dribble handoffs. I think he finds little areas. I understand what you're saying.
It's bad for the spacing though, and when you get into the chess match, like again, if you have a dual rim protector look, teams are going to roam off of him, and that can totally clog up the.
But paint. I think Cade makes Asar have value offensively because he's one of the best interior passers in the league. And I think it's like kind of a Shea variable where with Shea on the court, because of his mid-range shot making, we talk about how OKC can go to non-spaced lineups and still have functional offense. It's not to the same degree, but Cade being such an absurd interior passer just gives that look more utility. But then also there's the aspect of Asar and Duren can both dunk through traffic very easily. So you can't like be like Mobley, we need you to only watch Cade because Cade will find those windows and Asar will find those windows. But then also it's like if you roam off of Duren, it's putback city. Like I think Duren might just be a criminally underrated playoff player at this point. And I'm not saying either of you are doing this, but like I do think there's a scenario where Jalen Duren can be like a 25 point per game guy in a playoff series. And it's just straight up just nobody can do anything with him on the interior.
Well, and that specifically is the margin where I think Detroit over the course of a series would build it in on the glass. And what I think is so funny, we all have these teams right beside one another, right? Me and Tyler just lean on. I'm not.
I've got Detroit 5.
Oh,
I've got
okay.
Cleveland 5.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we don't, but they are
Pretty close.
They are relatively close, and I think we're
Yeah.
all pretty high on both of these
Well,
teams.
I was gonna say what's funny is I had Cleveland ahead of Detroit this morning, and then I did the exercise of hammering out both sides of the series, kind of like predicting what my playoff preview would look like going into the series. And this was a rare occasion where the more I thought about it, I was like, yeah, I think Detroit's got
Can
the
I ask you guys
advantage here.
another question?
Sure.
Yeah.
Who do you like more to beat Boston? Because
That's where I was
going to
go next.
Second round. Okay.
Probably Cleveland. Probably Cleveland. So
Yeah.
that's what's weird. I don't know because
Yeah.
that's
Really?
where it gets weird because I'm also going
I
to
think
run
you
into this
need
issue with
offensive firepower to beat Boston.
yeah, it's weird.
My thing
man.
is, well, I want to before we move on to that hypothetical, I will say it's funny to me you guys are arguing so staunchly for both sides. I really think this series is so close. Detroit is going to build margin through the glass and on the interior. They are going to give away margin offensively through their struggles of spacing. And I think what's likely going to happen is it's just going to come down to who operates better in the clutch for 3 to 4 games, and that's what's going to decide the series more than likely. And it could be Detroit's defense clamps down and grabs a bunch of boards and eats on Cleveland. It also could be, I could also buy that Donovan Mitchell and James Harden just pick apart the point of attack defense and generate a bunch of high-quality shots at the end of the game. Like, I think it is so close between these two teams that late-game execution could be just the deciding factor.
I
that
also
being
think,
said,
though, the floor with Cleveland gets really low.
I agree.
And,
That's why I'm taking
and it's
Detroit.
I could see a couple games where Detroit just blows them out because they turn the ball over 15 times and there's just dunks, just open dunks, and then you build this crazy margin. Kind of similar. I think there was a game like that in the Minnesota and Lakers series where I kind of had a similar thought process where I was like, Minnesota and LA is going to get down to these groggy games. Who can execute in the clutch? And then Minnesota's size and athleticism just overwhelmed LA so much that it didn't even matter. And that's kind of the variable I look at with Detroit, where no matter who they're playing, maybe even in NBA history, they are bigger than you, they're more athletic than you, they're more physical than you. They're going to turn you over, they're going to dominate the glass. And it's like, once those shots start going, because you are going to get some tour dates from Cade, you're also going to get some hot shooting nights from Cade where the pull-up jumper just starts working. And it's like, in those situations, I don't know if they can lose. Because they've, even just this season, they've matched up so well against the best teams in the league. Like, they matched up really well against OKC. They matched up really well with Boston. They've had these games this season. I think Cade actually shot 11 for 30 in a game against Boston, and they won that game. So it's like, they have played really well against the top
4
teams.
of 17 in a game against Cleveland, and they won one of them. I mean, he had 2 terrible shooting nights against Cleveland, but I know that they won one of them. So, dude, I mean, they have been so impressive in their ability to survive Cade off nights, because you think with the load he has offensively, that has to be the pitfall of this team, right? If he is struggling to make those intermediate shots that they need to live off of because of the clunky spacing and the lack of ball handling elsewhere, it's going to be really hard to win games. And yet the defense has been so great. I mean, they are margin maxing, absolutely, and I'm pro margin for sure. They're a +7 net team in the non-Cade minutes. This is real, dude. They're 13-5 in full basketball games Cade Cunningham doesn't play in this year. So, they are a super impressive basketball team. It's not about one guy. Dennis Jenkins has been awesome. Duncan Robinson, I have to say, I'm so impressed by offensively, especially what he's been doing in the non-Cade stretch. So, I am getting higher on the Detroit offense because I'm okay, if Jenkins is an actual second ball handler who can play alongside Cade and solidify the non-Cade minutes, that really matters. Robinson being this level of shooting weapon, even though overall Detroit is one of the weakest three-point shooting teams in the NBA by percentage and volume, they have one weapon. And then you have the physicality, pain, athleticism stuff, and everything that Asar and especially Duran do. There's enough that can work here, but number 16 half-court offense does still worry me.
Can I ask you something about Cleveland too, Carson? Are you just fully convinced that they're going to easily get out of the first round against Atlanta?
Yes. Yeah, I am.
You think so?
I think Atlanta, respect, they've been playing awesome basketball. As a playoff team, I think built for some breakdowns. And a lot of it comes down to me just not being as confident in Jalen Johnson as a number 1 playoff option as a lot of people seem to be. I think that handle is going to really be tested. And I just worry about some of the inconsistency with the over-the-top shot making with him. So, no, I don't really view Atlanta as a threat whatsoever. And, like, what I don't want to undersell here is how insane the Cavs offense has been with James Harden. Like, when he and Mitchell play together, they have a 127 offensive rating. They're doing historic offensive shit again. And when he plays without Mitchell, they have a 119 offensive rating. So that was the issue for the Cavs earlier in the year. It was with Garland being out and with Garland not being himself. I mean, the lineups with Mitchell were always awesome. Mitchell's been playing insane this whole year. He didn't get enough credit, but they couldn't sustain anything close to that without him. Now you're in a place where it's like Harden has been the perfect offensive number 2, hyper efficient scoring, great playmaking, playing really well within this offense, enhancing those best offensive lineups as the number 2 to these crazy heights, and then also making them an awesome offense when he's on the floor without Mitchell, which is what Garland did last year. So I just think they are a scary, scary, scary offense, and I do have some questions about the defense. They have been super mediocre, and in the Harden-Mitchell minutes defensively, they've been worse than mediocre. So that's the thing. As insane as the offense is, they're giving some of it back defensively. I do still believe, again, in some of the perimeter defenders we've talked about and the dual rim protection stuff from Allen and Mobley. I think Schroeder is an interesting guy for them in the playoffs because I don't think he's been very good for them. He's been struggling to shoot, but I do think there's an element of point of attack defense plus rim pressure playmaking that he does bring when he's at his best. So it just feels like a team that at no point this year has played up to their potential, and maybe that should be the red flag, but then I'm also like, so many injuries, so many moving parts, moves at the deadline, Max Strus finally coming back. Like, I just think when it all lines up for them, the ceiling is so high that I would take them over Detroit. And I do think to beat Boston, a team that is so great on both sides of the ball and like has so many answers, I think you need to be able to outgun them. And I think Cleveland can outgun them. Now, I still think either Cleveland or Detroit is a significant underdog to Boston to me, but there's more upside that I can see winning out over a 7-game series there. I love the margin, but I also love half-court offense in the playoffs. It is like the biggest indicator in terms of deep playoff success that we have, and you can be an exception to it in all these ways, and that's why Detroit is still an awesome team. But I do think it's just a little bit of a different game come playoffs.
It is just kind of weird to think about because, like, there's also the aspect of OKC's half-court offense in the playoffs wasn't very good. And obviously OKC is kind of an outlier, but I don't know. I look at some of these teams and it's like, I don't know. I do think half-court offense is a very important indicator, but it's like if it's half-court offense at the expense of rebounding margin and turnover margin and things like that, that's where it becomes really tough for me to really be sold. I mean, obviously that's why none of these teams are in tier 1 because there are teams that check all of those boxes. And so maybe it's just kind of like, there is something each of these teams is still missing, but I think Detroit's primed for like one of those runs where we kind of have to adjust the way we think about playoff basketball if they're just like so overwhelming.
Yeah. The thing with the OKC point is they were an amazing regular season half-court offense. They went through a shooting lull. They were an average playoff half-court offense while being the greatest playoff defense that we have seen arguably in 6 decades, at least in 2 decades, right? Posting literal historic relative defensive numbers while being the best turnover margin team in the history of the NBA and the best transition margin team, I think, possibly in the history of the NBA. I don't remember. They're definitely very much at the top of that list. So it's like they're just such an outlier, and they were a substantially better half-court offense than Detroit. Like, if you look at recent champs, and I mean, I did this, the only team that was in this range of half-court offense to win the title were the 2020 Lakers, who had LeBron and AD, who then made them like an awesome playoff half-court offense. Like in the regular season, it was not so great, but then some role players maybe overperformed in the playoffs, but they also had like 2 mega superstars. I just am not that confident in Cade's playoff offense in a vacuum. I think he can be forced into a tough shot diet. And I think we've covered Pistons Cavs enough at this point, if you guys do. I mean, it's a very interesting conversation, but we've been pretty thorough up to this point. The last thing that I will say, actually, I just want to specifically shout out the numbers for Dennis Jenkins and Duncan Robinson without Cade, because Jenkins has been 17 points and 8 assists a game on 56% true shooting, like legitimately good passer. And even though the efficiency is sketchy and like the finishing maybe leaves something to be desired and he can live off a pretty like mid-range heavy shot diet, what stands out with him is he's just comfortable. Like, he's very comfortable and he's quick. And so he's able to put some pressure on a defense, get to those intermediate looks, create shots for his teammates in a way that, like, I think matters. Like, I think he needs to be a 25-minute-a-game guy for them. Even if he can be attacked defensively, I think having that sort of talent alongside Cade and having that sort of ball handling in the non-Cade minutes, like in the non-Cade minutes, they're a plus 10 net team when Dennis Jenkins is on the floor, and they've been a really good team when they're together. So I think he's like a huge X factor for them in the playoffs.
He's also a really good, difficult three-point shooter as well, just like off different, feet placement, stuff like that. And he's always, what I love most about him is his feel and positioning. Like, he's always one of those guys that is just in the right spot, making little plays, and he rocks. He's a really solid rotation guy for them. And I think if there wasn't one guy that was running away with it, I think he would make a really good case for most improved player this year from where he was at the beginning of this season. I think that there's a guy that's, clearly running away with it, but he'd be an honorable mention for me. He's having an awesome year.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't an NBA player effectively last year, but he was
played
technically
7 games
on the roster. Yeah, so he has.
He wouldn't even.
Really,
I don't
really
even think he'd be eligible for most improved because of that. Like, I remember Ty Jerome wasn't eligible last year because he only played 5 games the year before, which is kind of weird, right? Like,
that is weird. You would think as long as you're not a rookie, if you're coming from like non-rotation guy to really good player, you should get a shout for that. But he matters for them. And then Duncan Robinson, like, I hope he gets properly remembered as truly one of the best three-point shooting specialists ever, right? This is not a Luke Kennard. Luke Kennard can lead the league in percentage every year. Like, the size, the ability to do it off movement, like, he is a true weapon. And the number of big shots he has made in Cade's absence, and like the profound offensive impact he has on this team, where the spacing is such a value, and like you can really like run stuff that is centered around Duncan Robinson. I mean, when he's on the court without Cade this year, they have a 120 offensive rating. He is the biggest offensive on-off swing on the team. It's bigger than Cade's. So, like, shout out to him. 15 a game on 70% true shooting without Cade Cunningham. Those guys are making me higher on Detroit, and I think they've been so impressive. And, like, honestly, I don't know what Detroit could have shown me in the regular season that would have moved me beyond just, like, this fundamental concern I have about them as a team. So, we differ on Cleveland and Detroit. Logan, you have Detroit 6, Cleveland 7, correct?
Correct.
But the 6th spot is still open for you, Tyler. So who slots in there?
It's Minnesota, and I'm assuming that's Logan's 5 and your 6.
Correct.
Minnesota, I think there are some concerns with the half-court offense at times, but then also there's this Anthony Edwards button you can push where it's like, oh, no one can stay in front of me. I'm just going to get a paint touch every single play, and then that kind of opens everything up. Basically, I don't really have anything new to add to Minnesota that we haven't talked about for years. It's the same recipe over and over again. It's we're big, we're athletic. We've got really good three-point shooting. We're a really deep defensive team. And we've got serious lineup versatility where we can go to 5-out lineups with Naz Reid. We can go to defensively oriented lineups with Rudy Gobert. And you've kind of just thrown Ayo Dosunmu into this as another guy who can initiate offense, play off the catch, space the floor, defend, use his length in a variety of ways. And it's just, I really think all of the issues are the same, though. Like, you still lack some point guard play. You still lack defensive consistency and some defensive versatility. They're kind of rigid in their scheming where they can't go to a lot of the stuff that you see with Detroit or Boston or OKC. But then also, like, their offensively slanted lineups aren't quite good enough to reach the heights that we've talked about with, like, a Cleveland, for example. Yeah. So I do put them in this group of teams that, like, they have a proven playoff recipe that works. I trust them in the playoffs, but I still don't think they have a high enough ceiling to knock off the top teams in the West, so it's a lot harder for me to see them go on a run. And so I kind of slotted them in the 6th spot because I do feel they're a better team than Cleveland, but in the spirit of, like, making a run, I do think Cleveland probably has a better shot. I don't know. I don't know. They're a weird team, but I do think this is a tier with, like, Detroit, Minnesota, and Cleveland.
I completely agree.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think that Minnesota is probably a little bit worse than last season just because they lost Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and I do think he was vitally important to and obviously he's way better, right? He doubled his point total. He has been unbelievable for Atlanta this season, but kind of like what you're saying, tying some of these lineups together, I do think he can get underrated for what he could do as a point of attack guy, as an off-ball guy, bringing you some
100%.
supplementary ball handling and spot-up shooting.
He was part of the most menacing, outside of OKC, point of attack defensive duo in the NBA, and now they just don't have that at all. They just have Jaden McDaniels.
Yeah, and now
they
have
do have Jaden McDaniels, and we have KD, but they have Jaden McDaniels.
They do have Dosunmu now into the fold, and I think he has been awesome for Minnesota since joining them. 14-4-4 on nearly 62% true shooting. They have been banged up over this recent stretch. Jaden McDaniels just got cleared. He's dealing with a left knee injury, missed the last 6 games. Edwards has missed 9 of the last 11 games for Minnesota with a right knee injury. And it kind of seems like we are marching head first towards a Minnesota-Denver rematch in the first round, which is going to be awesome.
Yeah.
The thing that I don't want to undersell, though, is the fact that this team has now been to back-to-back Western Conference Finals, and they have kind of this blend of what we're talking about, of what we like with, and obviously they're not as, they don't have the superpowers of a Cleveland or Detroit, but they are this mix of both, where they have this power-strength element with their superstars, and they're big and physical, and they're nasty on the glass, but they also do have this offensive superstar in Anthony Edwards. I don't know. I couldn't have them that far separated from a team like Denver, where I think they are very close to one another, and I only have these two teams separated by 1 because I think they are so neck and neck and so close to one another. I just couldn't have Denver and Minnesota separated by more than 1 spot, where I think they are so similar to one another. I think they are basically at a 50-50 toss-up for me, and I like Denver, and Denver's hitting their stride at this point of the season. They're figuring it out defensively. They're getting healthy. They're playing really good basketball. Like Denver, I feel like Minnesota is a team that's going to scale better and play better when it comes to the playoffs and crank up their intensity, and I really like that power strength element with them, where I still feel like Julius Randle in 90% of matchups is just a handful. Now, that Aaron Gordon matchup is going to be awesome to watch head-to-head, but against 90% of matchups, he's creating advantages, he's kicking out, he's playmaking for teammates. Anthony Edwards is relentless getting to the rim. He is a matchup nightmare for 95% of teams, and all of this is basically just to say, I know Minnesota has been underwhelming due to the expectations that we've had for them. I think they are arguably slightly worse last season because they don't have a guy like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, but I just don't want to overlook them in these matchups where I feel like we could look up in Minnesota, you know, maybe by a little bit of luck, they could be back in the Western Conference Finals again this year because of what a solid team they are on both ends of the floor. Ironically, that being said, there are 3 teams in the West that I do have above them, but I think there's a real chance that Minnesota, and they're going to run into OKC in the second round, so they probably, you know, in most likely outcome, just get bounced
Logan,
there.
you
but
do not have the seeding right.
Are they not?
They're going to run into the Spurs.
They're 4-5, right? They would.
No, it's 3-6.
They play through. Fuck, man. I'm all discombobulated, bro. No, there's definitely there's more of a chance that Minnesota could get to the WCF if they don't draw OKC. Yeah, totally. So, I don't know. I'm a little surprised from you guys. I just think Minnesota's shown us and proven it to us a little bit more. Just that you guys don't have
I feel like 6 is showing them respect for that, because there's literally none of the metrics, like nothing about the basketball they've been playing recently would say, oh yeah, Minnesota's a top 6 team.
I just think they've shown it to us
the playoff formula.
In the playoffs the past 2 years.
And that's why I have them in my 6th spot. But like they've been playing a lot of really shitty basketball, you know.
I will say though, they did majorly upgrade in one area that I think could be a factor in the playoffs. They were one of the worst transition teams in the league last year, and they're both offense and defense. And this year they've been a really good transition offense and defense. At least against top 10 teams, I think they had the #1 transition margin of any team in the NBA. So it's like that is something that, along with the fact that they can go to half-court offense lineups that are really good and then also half-court defensive lineups that are really good. The problem is still the same, though. It's like when you have Rudy Gobert out there are buttons that teams can push to make your offense really groggy. And when you don't have him out there, you cannot defend. And it's like that lack of just one 5-man lineup that is both elite on offense and defense is something that other teams have that they don't. And that's the problem, in my opinion.
I completely agree. And then I look at Cleveland and Denver, and I'm like, okay, they can't put out elite defensive lineups maybe, but they can put out pretty good defensive lineups that are astronomical offensively, like the best offensive lineups in the NBA. I still look at Minnesota and I'm like, they're very good. They have clear paths to being very good on both sides of the ball, but they don't have like that superpower. It's exactly what you're saying, Tyler, like that great, totally complete lineup that would put them in my top 5. And they're definitely bringing some very bad momentum into the playoffs. They've lost 4 of 6. Jaden McDaniels' knee has been banged up. Ant's got runner's knee, which like I do think is a little sketchy. If you're talking about a tiebreaker in the 5 spot, like health matters. And obviously Cade has had this collapsed lung, but like he's apparently very close to being cleared. And I don't think that is going to have nearly as lingering of an impact as runner's knee, which
runner's knee is debilitating, bruh. I got it once because my dumbass, I ended up, my knee was hurting and I ran 10 miles on it because I was like, nah, man, I'm tough. I'm tough. I can handle this. I don't want to be soft today. You can't really do anything on it. It is just like this shooting horizontal pain, and the only solution is to sit and wait for it to go away.
And Ant has only played in 2 of their last 11 games accordingly, and he looked bad when he played. So that's concerning, that lingering into the playoffs. Like, obviously, they need him so much. I think both of them should be fine optimistically and, like, right to be resting. Ant shouldn't play again this regular season because there's no reason. He's already not eligible for awards and stuff, All-NBA, which sucks. But it's just very scary timing. And then it's like over their last 20 games, which Ant has still played in slightly more than half of, they're just 27th in offensive rating. Like, you know, that probably matters a little bit. Like, it's been ugly. So I do think, although there's a lot of bad stuff that's been happening, my view of this team really hasn't changed. I think I've had them in the 5 or 6 spot like the entire year because I do think they're built for the playoffs in a lot of ways. They have a proven playoff number 1 scorer. They have a lot of size and strength, which translates, and they have a lot of 3-point shooting around that. They have a top 5 defense. They've got a really good top 7. Like, Ayo is awesome. I'm so high on him. I think he is a player who it's very easy to see swinging playoff games with his speed and his shot making, like what he can do playing off of an Ant, but what he can also do creating in transition, like just a dynamic offensive player. He's given them 14, 4, and 4 on 61% true shooting. And although I still agree they need a point guard, like they really needed a playmaking guard of any kind other than Ant. And they did get that in Ayo, and he stepped up in a huge way. I've gotten lower on the non-Gobert lineups just because I think they're so problematic defensively that I don't as much view like that, oh, we can go Nas at the 5 as a killer look anymore. I also think Nas hasn't been as good this year as he was last year. So it's still a look to throw. But honestly, Tyler, I think you said it perfectly. Like, they can reach the balance of being pretty damn good on both sides of the ball, but to reach elite heights on either side of the ball, they need to compromise something pretty significant. And I don't feel like the top tier teams are put in that sort of bind. And then I also do trust some of the guys, like when you talk about offensive number 1s above this, more than Ant, honestly, just because I think the decision-making, playmaking with Ant can be questionable.
Yeah, and also, like, to your point, they figured out the non-Gobert minutes in this recent stretch by putting Kyle Anderson in there, but then you lose your 5 out. You lose the advantage of the non-Gobert minutes. So, yeah, it is weird. It is really weird. They aren't able to construct those elite 2A lineups. And like you said, if they do go to the defensive slant, Anthony Edwards can't impose himself on games as a playmaker or even as a 2-point scorer, really, when you start to pack the paint in the way that, like, a Shea can, or even a Brunson. Mm-hmm. I will say Ant's mid-range leap has been awesome. Like, he's been awesome this year, but it's still not what you get from like a Shea or a Brunson.
Exactly. It's like, is he going to go and carve up playoff defenses off of the mid-range game? Like, I still haven't seen that from him. The volume has gone up. He's been better at it for sure, but it's like, is there the level of nuance and comfort there where it's like, that's how he's controlling playoff series, which sometimes is what you need to do against the coverages that he's going to be seeing. I am still not in on that. And I know some Timberwolves fans like think they found something in Bones Highland. I'm going to be real. Not a guy who can play in the playoffs because the defense is just going to be so bad. It's like, there's a lot of stuff to like with the Timberwolves for the playoffs. I totally think they can beat the Nuggets, and I think they could beat the Spurs, but I think both those teams are playing better basketball. Both those teams clearly have superpowers, and I think both those teams are better bets to beat OKC, where I really can't see a world where the Timberwolves put a scare into the Thunder, honestly. I just think it's such a bad matchup for them.
The Spurs matchup's also weird because they can't get Wemby out of the paint.
No.
And if Wemby's in the paint, you're not going to be a good offense. It's just
That's true. That's true. I think specifically the Denver matchup is one they've just always been comfortable in because the Nuggets cannot guard Ant. And I think overall there's like a power physicality dynamic that they sort of assert. And then I think Jokic just had some unbelievable performances against the Timberwolves, but they do guard him relatively well because of the Gobert of it all. So that's different. I think that's a really good point about how functional can their offense be against a Victor Wembanyama-led defense when they have to have Rudy Gobert in the game to contend with Wemby on the other end. I think that's more of a long shot matchup for them. So I definitely like Denver more, but yeah, in this matchup, it's not that far off from a toss-up. But I do still like Denver because the Denver offense looks so amazing right now. Aaron Gordon is so important for them. They've just been playing awesome when he's in. And then, again, I don't think it's everything when you bring bad momentum into the playoffs, but I also don't think it's nothing. And the physical thing with Ant actually probably matters a little bit more. So that's where I land on the Timberwolves at number 6. Then I have the Cavs at 5. Tyler, you had the Pistons at 5. So who's in your 4 spot?
This is another tier jump. To me, now we're in the inner circle. I have 4 teams in my inner circle of contenders. I landed on Boston at 4, which is kind of tough because I feel like I could get them higher, but I think the other teams have just proven more this season. Maybe it's still the only 13 games of Jason Tatum or whatever that we've seen. But Boston all year has had these superpowers, right? You kind of alluded to it earlier, where they've established a higher floor for themselves this year, where it used to be kind of an over-reliance on the three-point shot at times, especially in those late-game situations where the Knicks switch everything. They let Brunson go on an island with Tatum and Brown, and it's we can just make them shoot a lot of threes and hope that luck is on our side. You don't have that same room to make errors because they dominate the turnover battle. They just do not turn the ball over at all. They're the number 1 turnover team in the league, I believe, if not second to OKC. Yeah. They dominate the offensive glass. And it's if you take them off the offensive glass, there's still so much working for them. They have 2 of the best creators in the game. They have the best 3-point shooting roster in the game besides maybe Charlotte. They can put pressure on the rim. They can just beat you in so many different ways offensively. And then defensively, there's not much to poke at. Pritchard obviously is a small guard. He's undersized in certain matchups, but he still defends, and that's important. Sam Hauser off the bench defends. They've got a 19-year-old rookie who defends extremely well, and Hugo Gonzalez, he will bring full court pressure for 12 minutes a game in a playoff series. Baylor Shiren defends, and then you've still got this variable of so many different types of lineups they can go to where you want to throw Tatum on a center maybe and go small ball. They actually went small ball recently, I think against OKC. They had Tatum at the 5 for an extended stretch. That's kind of new. You can go to Keita and have a drop big monster rim protector. You can go to Vooch if you want to go 5 out on offense. Jaylen Brown can be used in a variety of ways as an on-ball defender. Derek White is just, I actually will spoil something for my podcast. I had Derek White on my All-NBA 3rd team. So shout out to Derek White. That was kind of a crazy poll. So did Sean, by the way. Sean and I both had Derek White on our All-NBA teams. But Derek White's awesome. And in the playoffs, he's going to be even more awesome on both sides of the ball. If Derek White starts hitting his threes, good luck beating Boston, is all I will say. But yeah, I think the Celtics have so many different ways to beat you. The only reason I have 3 teams ahead of them is I think I do have Denver ahead of them just simply off the fact that I think they might be the best half-court offense in NBA history. I don't know what you do besides maybe the Warriors. And it's I don't know what you do against Denver to slow them down in a playoff series outside of hope they miss shots at this point because Cam Johnson is hitting his stride at the perfect time. Aaron Gordon being a reliable 3-point shooter, it just brings them to a completely different level. Jamal Murray's at his absolute peak. So that half-court offense to me is such a buzzsaw in a way that I don't think Boston... I think Boston is A to A- offense and defense. Yeah. I don't think they hit the defensive heights of OKC or Detroit. I don't think they hit the offensive heights of Denver. So to me, without that one superpower, I do kind of have them hanging in this just below Denver at number 3. But I think Boston, they could beat anyone in a playoff series. And they pose some really interesting challenges to OKC specifically.
Right. That's what I was about to ask you. Who's a better bet to beat OKC? I mean, if the ultimate measuring stick is, and it's not black and white on this, but the bar to win the title is probably who can beat the Thunder. Do you like the Celtics or the Nuggets more to do that?
Probably the Celtics. I don't know. That's tough. That's the reason I have San Antonio ahead of both of them. I think San Antonio's the team that would take out OKC if anyone does it. But yeah, it's weird, man, because Boston has interesting advantages, but also Denver has this like, what if Jokic just goes nuclear and we can't do anything about it? Like, because the Jokic variable of it all is still just like something in the back of my head where it's like he might just be an offensive god in any series and you're screwed.
It's true. It's true. I said the other day that I feel like OKC pretty much has Denver figured out. And I saw some people getting upset about that, but I just think they're very comfortable in that matchup on both sides of the ball. I think Shea, I can say for sure, has completely figured out all the gimmicky defenses they throw because they just can't guard him. They cannot face the Thunder without hemorrhaging wide open threes to everybody around him. And if they're making those shots, like, game over. Yeah. And then defensively, like, they guard Jokic at a level unlike anything we've ever seen. And so there's always a lingering thought of, okay, yeah, Jokic could go God mode. But then it's like when we have 14 games in which the numbers he posts against OKC are just not Jokic-like, and the turnovers are higher and the assists are lower and the scoring volume's down and the efficiency is way down. It's like, why am I going to expect him to suddenly be able to just overcome like all these things they so clearly do so well? Whereas I look at Boston and I'm like, they do put them in an interesting bind because they're going to force Shea to make a lot of the same decisions, right? Nobody is going to guard Shea one-on-one whatsoever. Everybody is going to do this stuff where they're super aggressive with gap help and they slant their defense towards him and they're trying to force the ball out of his hands and make three-point shooters beat them. Boston can do that with significantly better defensive personnel than Denver without having to like be as extreme. And then if OKC is like, okay, to compensate for that, we need to get more shooting on the floor. What does that mean? That means more Jared McCain. That means more Isaiah Joe. That means more AJ Mitchell potentially. And Boston is like the best team in the NBA at mismatch attacking, right? Jaylen Brown, it's his specialty. Tatum, we know what he looks like at his best in that regard. And so they have an ability with size and power to punish some of those OKC more offensively slanted lineups in a way that like other teams can't. So that's where I think Boston is definitely a more tricky OKC matchup. But in terms of just bottom line, I'm also higher on Boston. So I have them all the way up in my 2 spot. I've been drinking the Kool-Aid all year long. I mean, this is where I had them last time we did our top 10 contenders, and that was when Tatum had just gotten back. And then I flipped to San Antonio at 2 and Boston 3, and now I flipped back because I just think they look absolutely amazing. But Logan, where do you land on the Celtics?
I split the middle between you guys. I have them in my 3 spot. I went with Boston over Denver specifically because of my confidence of them in a first-round matchup. I am going to dock Denver because I think that Minnesota has a real chance at winning that head-to-head matchup, and that matters to me. I think San Antonio is the more likely team to knock off OKC. That's why I went with San Antonio over Boston. But Tyler hit the nail on the head about why I have grown higher on Boston. You guys have both been talking about this. It's that lineup versatility. It's the fact that they have so many different counters and looks. And throughout this year, one of my big overarching takeaways from this season has been one, the weak link thing that we've seen from NBA teams, not having a guy that you can really go at and attack is very important across all lineups, but having different looks and counters when it comes playoff time is very, very important to me, and Boston just has all kinds of different buttons that they can press. Like you mentioned, at the center spot, you need offensively slanted lineups. Let me get Luka Garza. Let me get Big Vooch. We need a rim protector, a dominant rebounder. Let me get Kata. I need some wing defense off the bench. Give me Hugo. Give me Jordan Walsh. Like, there's just Boston. And also, too, the reason these teams are all 4, I don't know if you guys feel the same way. When I watch these teams, they all just play for one another. And that's very cliche, but, like, Boston is so buttoned up and prepared. And Joe Mazzulla is, by far to me, the best coach in basketball. Denver has played together for so long, and their continuity is rock solid. They all get it. San Antonio reminds me of like OKC over the past 2 years, where like they are so ahead of schedule, they're so youthful, they're so athletic, but they also all love each other and have this team chemistry. Like,
it's a power of friendship.
Power of friendship.
It really is. Like, I know that's cliche and sometimes gets beaten to the ground. That's another smaller component of why these teams are all top 4 to me. But yeah, I think these are all 4 of these teams are legitimate threats to hoist the title at the end of the season.
I'll tell you why I went with Boston at 4. and where my head was kind of at, and you could push back if you want.
Sure.
I think
I will.
with Boston, you will. Of course, we always do the little back and forth. You'll push back, but
We'll go
I think
45 minutes
my one hang up with Boston that I don't have with any of the other three teams is I do think, which by the way, just to throw some numbers at you, I pulled those top 10 or the half court offensive numbers against top 10 defenses in the league. I had the Clippers were number 2. The other top 5 spots are filled by these 4 teams. You've got Denver at 1, San Antonio at 3, OKC at 4, and Boston at 5. So like these are the teams that dominate the half court offense, and then also obviously with OKC, Boston, and San Antonio, you get this monster defensive signal as well.
Yeah.
My problem with Boston is I don't think they're good at getting the easy stuff on offense. They are a extremely low volume transition team. Against top 10 defenses, they are the second lowest transition scoring team besides Golden State. Golden State's the only one below them in transition scoring. So Boston they just do not score in transition. They also are the worst team of any of these teams against top 10 offenses at forcing turnovers. They don't really have any high steals guys. And so it's like, if you're not playing early in possessions, early offense, getting those transition opportunities, and you're also not forcing turnovers and getting easy stuff that way, I can see a scenario where they're forced into a lot of half-court situations that are just a lot tougher to come by against high-level defenses, where like a Jaylen Brown, now you're really relying on Jaylen Brown, like, please drag us out of the mud. And Jaylen Brown, as good as he's been as a shot maker this season, has been a 55% true shooting guy for 4 months now. And It's like, if that's the button we have to push in late game situations against teams that don't have mismatches for him to attack. But then there's also the variable of Jaylen Brown's athleticism being kind of unschemable at times. Like in that recent matchup against OKC, they could not guard him. He just got to the paint whenever he wanted in that second half. So I do think there's kind of a yin and yang there. But my big hang up with Boston is I don't think they get as much easy stuff on offense. And then I don't think Denver does either, but also the easy stuff is we have Jokic who can generate a 60% shot anywhere inside of 16 feet. That's the easy stuff. I think San Antonio, they're a really good transition team, but also they are so overwhelmingly athletic with like Stephon Castle, Harper, and Fox, and then Wemby's variable as a play finisher. You're going to get a lot of easy corner threes. That's kind of your easy stuff. And then OKC, obviously. Like I pulled the numbers against top 10 teams. They win the battle turnover percentage by 4%. No other team is even over 1%. They just absolutely blitz teams when it comes to turnovers. They also win the transition differential by about a point. They're second behind only Minnesota, I mentioned. They have a number 4 half-court offense and a number 1 half-court defense. They just check every box. And then you also have the fact that Shea is the best late game player in basketball, where it's like, if we get into close games, he's going to impose himself as a fourth quarter scorer and not turn the ball over. So I think that's kind of where I kind of separated these teams, where Boston, I think, is the worst at getting the easy stuff. OKC is the best at getting the easy stuff. And I kind of went from there. There is an interesting Denver and San Antonio discussion I want to have, but let's... Yeah, you have any pushback on Boston?
My pushback on that would be 2024, isn't all of that same stuff true? They played slow. They got in transition a little bit more, but still not much. They didn't force a lot of turnovers, and they were just so insanely good in the half court on both ends that they won the title like in dominant fashion. Like, I just think this is Boston basketball, but I think the combination of ball handling, creation, playmaking, shooting that they have in the half court is so overwhelming. I think the defensive versatility that they have is so good. And now I do think they create more margin than ever because they've always been great in terms of keeping turnovers low. But now they have this elite offensive rebounding factor too. Like, I just don't worry about that. And I think the thing that you really can't undersell with this Boston team is they were second in net rating and had a top 4 record in the NBA before Jason Tatum set foot on the court. And like, my belief was never that he was going to make their metrics like way better, because that's not really possible, although they have been even better with him. But it's more so just he gives you such optionality on both ends. Like, his calling card is being the most versatile player in basketball. And I think we have already seen that like fully fleshed out. So when he plays, they're 13-2 with a plus 11.5 net rating. And I really thought about who I trust more between them and the Spurs, because as great as I think Denver is, I do still think the two-way difference, like just the major defensive gap that is in advantage of Boston and San Antonio compared to Denver, it puts them not in another tier, but just above Denver for me. And I just believe in this Boston offense more. If it's like the maturity of the lead creators who they are relying on, the consistency of like the top to bottom offensive talent here, San Antonio's been the number one offense in basketball for 30 games. And yet, when it comes to my playoff faith, I just question the perimeter shooting with some of those guys some more. I even question some of the things that Wemby's going to have to deal with. His offensive impact is always so pronounced. But it's like with Boston, you know what their bread and butter stuff is, and yet there's more options and more layers there than ever before. Like when they want to go, hey, mismatch attacking, Tatum, Brown, everybody space around them. We've got crazy shooting. Brown is better than he's ever been as a scorer, and he's better as a passer. But like Tatum's passing has just immediately popped like crazy again. Like he is such a good passer. And then when you've got Peyton Pritchard and Sam Hauser and Derek White and Nikola Vucevic and like all of these guys who can just rain 40% of their threes around them, it's such an elite offensive formula, like in its most simple form. But then they also do have a more dynamic pick and roll attack this year where they've done more like actual fluid stuff going on around you in terms of the off ball action. And like, it's much less so stagnate, mismatch attack, everybody stand around and watch, but they can go to both. And so I just think the offensive floor is higher. I think possibly the offensive ceiling is higher because I do think in that way they get a bit more easy stuff in the half court as opposed to like everything, the burden always being on, okay, Tatum Brown, create an advantage every time. Like there's more dudes who they can go to. And so when Tatum already looks like a top 10-ish player again, that was the big question coming off an Achilles tear 9-10 months later, like he's giving you 22, 10, and 5 on 55% true shooting. And the scoring volume and efficiency isn't what it is from Tatum at its best. And the offense is still more like running through Jaylen Brown at this point, but the rebounding, the passing is so outstanding from Tatum. Like the comfort with the pull-up shooting at his size, like he's always going to have that combination. So even if he's not a takeover scorer, even if Jaylen Brown is just like flat out the better scorer on this team this year, I don't care. I still think Tatum is going to be the most impactful player, and I still think he's going to deliver like top 10 level playoff value. And so I just don't know what you question about this team, really. Like I think maybe you could look at the center situation and say, I don't love that, but I actually think Kata is good. And I think Tatum, again, just like ties so many things together for them where he gives them so many defensive options where you're not as concerned about Kata being like a straight drop big because you can put Tatum on centers and he can switch everything. And then you can have Kata roaming, or you can go like actual Tatum at the 5 in short stretches. He just gives you so much versatility. And so when it's the highest offensive floor they've had, it's the best version of Jaylen Brown. I really believe in Peyton Pritchard's playoff offense. I think he's a weapon, and I think he's going to have to fight to hold his own on the other end defensively, but offensively, I mean, he's such an off-ball weapon. He's a really good pick and roll scorer, and one of the best isolation scorers in basketball, which is such a separator for a small guard where like most of these guys that you put a big wing on them and like they can struggle with that. Pritchard is so shifty and he is so money on those short range jumpers that like he barbecues teams that switch on him, especially bigs. He just eats them alive. So when I put together this offensive combination and then the fact that they've got a top 4 defense in the NBA this year, most of that without Jason Tatum, while they're a top 2 offense, most of that without Jason Tatum. Like, I think they're a tier above everybody else in the East, and I do think the two-way balance from them is so supreme. And I've gone back and forth on this with them in San Antonio. It's extremely close because San Antonio is like an insane defense and a really good offense. Boston is probably A- on both sides. They're not an A+ on either side, but I think the defense is still so good, and I do just trust the offense more. Like, the downside for Boston is what? I mean, you could have an inefficient Brown-Tatum series where maybe, like, the jumpers just are a little bit up and down for them, but there's so much good around them, and they're always going to be creating so many advantages. And Joe Mazzulla is brilliant. Like, I haven't seen a more obvious coach of the year in my life, so when it comes to pushing the buttons, and he has so many buttons to push at his disposal with Tatum back in the playoffs, I just think in a high leverage matchup, they check every box for me. High end talent, depth, like coaching, both sides of the ball. So yeah, I really think they have a chance in the OKC matchup. And And that's what moved me, because there was a time where I was like, is San Antonio the only team that I really think can beat OKC? And Boston showed me in that game that they have a formula too, and they have an ability to make OKC uncomfortable and attack that defense in a way that nobody else can if they can force them into the right lineup. So they're just so complete.
The 2024 Celtics reference is interesting because you really made me think about it. Like, you brought up, they also didn't dominate transition offense, and they also didn't force a lot of turnovers. I will say, though, the big difference for me is I think the 2024 Celtics were another level defensively, just because of Drew Holiday instead of Pritchard in your backcourt. Like, Drew Holiday being your other point of attack defender just makes you basically a flawless defense. My other argument would be, well, I also think that version, that was like basically peak Tatum. Like, if Tatum's playing at that level in the playoffs.
Not in the playoffs, though.
Not in the playoffs, but like just in terms of, well, that's my other point. The competition of the run. I do think the 2026 Celtics would win that run again. Like, if you just drop them into 2024, I do think they still win the championship. I don't think the 2024 team would be better than OKC today. That's the difference for me. So that's what's weird. It is weird because like all of your points, you bring up really good points, and it's like, I don't really know what you poke at schematically with Boston. Like, if I was coaching against Boston, to me, they're probably the hardest team to coach against.
They have no weakness. Like, I think more so than any other team in the NBA, they do not have a question. I think OKC is in a tier of their own, but I question their shooting around Shea. I question some of the offensive stuff around Shea. I question nothing about the Celtics. Like, I mean, you can nitpick tiny little stuff. Like, I don't know, how much can you play Jordan Walsh and Hugo Gonzalez, who have been these awesome defender, dirty work, effort, rebounding guys with their offense? And it's like, all right, so you're talking about, like, how much can they play their 8th and 9th guys? Like, I don't know. They've been good regular season players, but with Tatum back, I don't think they need them in the playoffs in the same way. And I do still think they're good players. And I do still think, like, they can swing games with all of the good role player stuff they do defensively and on the glass. So I'm very high on Boston. I think, look, if you look at the metrics, like, San Antonio is doing ridiculous stuff in these last 30 games, like absolutely absurd. And so I think those two teams are neck and neck, but there is a level of offensive completeness with Boston that I think is a level up from San Antonio even. So that's where I landed on them being higher. That being said, Logan, I think you and I are going to have the same team in our 4 spots. Is that the Denver Nuggets for you?
Yeah, I've got Denver in my 4 spot. Really, all it comes down to, because them and Boston are really close to me, I have San Antonio alone in my 2 spot because of my confidence in the OKC matchup and the fact that they have a Wemby. That's just an advantage I would give them over a team like Boston too. Like, Wemby just warps NBA teams' offenses and defenses in a different way individually. I just think he's the best player out of those 2 teams. Denver's only in my 4 spot because they've been playing elite basketball. They've finally gotten fully healthy. Like Tyler mentioned earlier, Cam Johnson's really hitting his stride, man. Like, Denver's just rounding into a classic Denver form, and there's only so much you can take away from a team like them in the regular season because they're not going to be consistently engaged end-to-end defensively. Like, this is the best stretch of basketball, I think, to really draw conclusions from. Like I mentioned earlier, the only reason they're in my 4 spot is because they are probably going to draw Minnesota, and I think that is a really problematic matchup for them. And then I would say them versus Boston. I just do think Boston is the obvious favorite out of the Eastern Conference, and in a way that I couldn't with Denver.
I think the difference is Boston can guard OKC and Denver can't guard OKC. That's what it comes down to for me.
Oh, I think Denver just gets dogged in that matchup. I don't think they can beat Oklahoma City. I just think we've seen it enough, and I understand that Denver fans would push back and, we have a Jokic. I've seen it too many times at this point now where they're going to put Hartenstein on Jokic. They're going to have Holmgren as the roamer. They're going to be blitzing from the backside with Kaysen, with Caruso. Like you mentioned, man, all the efficiency numbers go down. I think it would require San Antonio somehow coming out on top or Denver somehow avoiding the OKC matchup for them to come out of the Western Conference. And that's you disagree with that, Tyler. You think that they can take OKC head to head.
I don't think I would pick OKC probably like very confidently, but I do think Denver has a variable or an ability to beat them. There are variables there that they can attack. Like last year they got a lot of shooting luck on their side, right? Like there was a lot of shooting luck in that series on their side, but like that could happen again. Like OKC shooters have been very streaky this season. Case and Wallace and Lou Dort. I don't know how much I trust them to be volume 3-point
Not
shooters.
at all.
And with the way Denver shells up, that is kind of the stuff you have to give up. And obviously, we've talked about how Shea's figured them out. I totally agree. Shea has completely figured out that defense. But also, we only saw like a small sliver of what Denver could be offensively in that OKC series because Aaron Gordon, who is their third most important player, basically didn't exist in that series. He was hurt the entire time in that game 7. He could barely even move. And it's like Aaron Gordon, you need Aaron Gordon to break down OKC's defensive scheme because he's the one who counters the roams with the baseline cutting and with the corner 3-point shooting that he's developed. Also, they like to use, in a lot of these matchups, they like to use Aaron Gordon as a point forward to kind of diversify the offense, and you could not do that against OKC last year. Yet still, we were a couple bounces of the ball away from Denver being up 3-2. Like, they were really close to being up 3-2 with that in mind. And I do think OKC's gotten better. I also think Denver's gotten better. I think Denver is a better team this year. I think they have more shooters in their depth. I think they can go, honestly, I don't know how much we'll see it, but like the double big thing against OKC does interest me with Jokic and Valanciunas out there because if you had to point at one weakness with OKC, it's that they suck at rebounding. They are just they sacrifice rebounding to win in all these other areas. Yeah. And Denver has this switch they could flip where it's like, hey, if you want to put Caruso on Jokic, we'll have Jokic and Valanciunas down there, and we're gonna try and just outmuscle you for second chances for 10 minutes a game.
You don't think that is a very obliterated in transition?
I mean, you're gonna get obliterated in transition against OKC regardless. That's just something that's going to happen.
Yeah, and I do you're going to get obliterated like never before, though, with that. But also, I mean, look, I think Denver's going to try shit if we see it, because Denver has to try shit. The burden is on them to figure stuff out. But also, do I think that's an answer? No.
Like, what about J-Dub? He has not looked like himself at all. And it's like, we saw that the only way, like Denver's
beat them without J-Dub.
Denver did stifle OKC's offense in last year's playoffs outside of games 6 and 7. Like, OKC did not have a great offensive series. And I think a lot of that was that J-Dub really struggled in that series to create advantages off the catch once they started to shell up on Shea. I think AJ Mitchell.
A lot of that was also, I mean, OKC shooting terribly, which is always a possibility, but not something you want to just bank on as our defensive coverage. Right. And Shea's comfort versus those sort of shell looks this year versus early in that playoff series last year. Like, it actually confounded him early in the playoff series last year. Now it's like, I mean, he's just fucking sleepwalking to either a great shot for himself or for a teammate. So I just think that has run out. I think the luck has run out with that. Look, it's only something you can throw at a guy to like knock him off balance for so long. And then it's like, oh, I know what you're doing every possession. And this is what you have to do because you can't actually guard me.
Right. I think, I think the angle for Denver would be to kind of just slant towards offense and try and hope OKC gets cold. Like, maybe you start playing Tim Hardaway Jr. a lot because here's the way I look at it, right? It's like, if you have a lineup of Jamal Murray, Tim Hardaway Jr., Cam Johnson, Aaron Gordon, and Jokic, or even like Watson in there instead of Gordon or something, like, that is 5 40% 3-point shooters. You have 4 40% 3-point shooters around Jokic who can all ramp up their volume. And it's like OKC's defensive game plan with like the way they blitz from the backside, the way they like to trap. A lot of that falls through if you just have a lot of 3-point shooters. And I do think a lot of those situations where Denver found themselves in very winning positions in last year's playoff series offensively. And those skip passes were going to Christian Brown and Russell Westbrook, who shot a combined like 6 of 40 from 3 in that series. Like, I do think that is a really big difference this time around. And then also there's just like, I don't know. It's tough. Like, I don't think Denver wins that series. I do think OKC is the upper hand, especially because OKC is going to sleepwalk to the conference finals with the way the bracket's shaken up. Denver it would take probably 2 7-game series for Denver to get to OKC. And then at that point, they're just like, they're kind of cooked. But I do think, like I said, just the fact that OKC's offense can go cold at times, the fact that we don't know what we're going to see from J-Dub, the fact that Denver has a button they can push with offensive lineups, and the fact that I do still think they have the best offensive player on the planet. It's not that I expect them to win. It's that if it happened, I wouldn't be like sitting here like, what just happened? Like New York, Boston last year.
Yeah. I mean, it's not that. I would be really surprised, though. I think the most important player potentially in this series could be Tim Hardaway Jr. because he is the X factor in terms of just a lights out spot up shooter that they didn't have last year. But I think the challenge is, I mean, Denver might have to push some of these extremes in these lineups, right? Like, they might have to go all offense, as you're saying. And there's an argument that with how they defend the Thunder as is, Shea's individual defender isn't that important. So although I think Brown has like held his own more than anybody else on the Nuggets roster could,
But
when you're talking about him seeing so many bodies, and it's like Brown also hasn't done enough anyways, maybe you are just better off saying, THJ, you're going to be out there, like just be an engaged, high effort, decent part of this team concept defensively. And then offensively, you can actually make them pay in a way that Christian Brown never could, because Christian Brown is a disaster against the Thunder offense. So that's interesting. But again, I think they do probably give up too much defensively there. And I just don't think the defense is there for this Nuggets team. And like, they really have gotten manhandled more often than not. Like last year went 7, yeah, but it's like when OKC won, 2 absolute blowouts. Whenever Denver won, it was down to the wire, and now we're looking at 4 straight games OKC's won in the matchup. Denver's got a 110 offensive rating against OKC since last year. That's 14 games. They've got a -8 net rating. So like, OKC has just consistently posed all these problems, and they have figured out the problems that Denver initially posed for them, and Denver has figured out 0 of the problems that OKC has always posed for them. So maybe they could over a 7-game series. It just feels much less likely to me than teams like San Antonio and Boston, where it's like they just straight up have the two-way ability. Like they can actually hang with OKC more so on both sides of the ball. Denver, the defense is such a red flag in that matchup, even though the offense, I do agree, is the best in basketball. But it hasn't looked like the best in basketball against OKC, so they haven't been able to lean on that to really win games. I do think, though, Denver is awesome. I think they have to be in the top 4. Like, I've been optimistic about this team all year and seen this team as having the potential to be the best Nuggets team in the Jokic era. Like, just what they're doing offensively is so absurd. When Murray and Jokic share the court, they have like a 130 offensive rating. When Aaron Gordon and Jokic play together, they're 18-6. Like, I think there has been a lot of panic about them this year, much of which had to do with them just not being healthy. Peyton Watson being injured, and Gordon being injured, and Jokic being injured. And I think they very clearly have the best offense that they have had, because you have the best version of Murray. You have this version of Aaron Gordon who like is just a star. I mean, he is. The impact is star level, even though he's never been an all-star and probably never will be because the counting stats aren't there. But when he is just like this lights out 40+% three-point shooter with everything else he does, he's so awesome offensively, and their most important player defensively by far, who like actually makes them respectable on that side of the ball. And then you have a level of shooting on a team level they've never had before. Like, Denver's the number 1 3-point shooting team by percentage. They're almost top 10 in threes made. Like, they've always been a very low volume 3-point shooting team previously, and now they have that dimension to this offense. I think Jokic, outside of a down month in February when he was coming off an injury, is as great as he's ever been. It's the best depth that they've had. They actually have a playable backup center. Like, I think there's tons of reasons to think that Denver is the best they've been, and I just think the OKC matchup is really, really difficult for them. But the Spurs matchup is different. So I know you were saying you wanted to get back to that, Tyler, because I do think Denver can really win that series against San Antonio.
I was going to say, so this is another dilemma I ran into. I actually would pick Denver in a series over San Antonio right now. If they match up 2-3, I would pick Denver. But I still have San Antonio ranked higher than Denver because I think San Antonio is better against every other team. So it's weird because it's like, in the specific matchup, I think Denver beats San Antonio to then go on to lose to OKC. But I think if San Antonio beats Denver, they have a better chance to then go on and beat OKC and then win the finals. So I think like the way I kind of just like worked it on my head is like, I can picture the scenario of San Antonio beating Denver and then going on a run more than I can picture the scenario of like, yes, I think Denver will beat San Antonio, then go beat OKC. San Antonio, I think the problem is like that Denver's the one offense that is not affected by Wemby. And it's just the simple fact that like Jokic poses these questions for Wemby with his short mid-range game just kind of breaks the idea of Wemby's paint protection and the way that San Antonio likes to structure their defense. And then they don't have the like Karl Anthony Towns or someone to throw on Jokic unless you go double big. And then Luke Cornett and Wemby, then you get clunky offense because you have Luke Cornett and then non-shooting guards. So it's like there's really weird things. So with Jokic on the court, in Wemby's career, they've had a 125 offensive rating with both Jokic and Wemby on the court against the Spurs. And then that's usually a 111 for the Spurs with Wemby on the court. So it's like Denver just poses this problem that San Antonio hasn't figured out defensively. But against every other team, I was talking about this. I was like, I do think San Antonio has some defensive limitations if you can get Wemby out of the paint. I don't think there's a team in basketball that can do that. I don't, besides the Nuggets. Like, I look at OKC,
Yeah.
Wemby's going to be at the basket the entire time unless you put
100%.
McCain and Joe on the court, and then it's like, good luck stopping Castle and Fox from getting to the rim at will. I look at maybe Boston in a finals
That's what I was
matchup,
thinking.
but then it's like, then you have to get Kata off the court. And then also San Antonio is a really good rebounding team. So then, like, who's your like Vooch? Is Vooch going to be the guy stopping Wemby? I don't think so.
Like it. Yeah.
I really think it comes down to Wemby is like, he is. I mentioned that Boston's probably the hardest team to game plan for. Wemby's the hardest player to game plan for, where every single thing you poke at brings up a new question that's like, ooh, how do we deal with this? And it's really tough to picture any team taking Wemby out of his comfort zone, at least in terms of like two-way impact. I could see him having some rough scoring series or turning the ball over a lot in certain matchups, but the defensive impact is so high that the floor with him is so high. And then I look at the Spurs, the way they've shaped out around him. My one big concern for most of the season was any lineup where you put enough defensive competency around Wemby is going to sacrifice spacing. And then once you get shooters on the court, you sacrifice that defensive competency. Now that I've established that I don't think Wemby's going to be pulled out of the paint, I don't even think it matters. I think you can just put your best offensive players in the court and you're fine. So like San Antonio's probably going to be closing these playoff games with Fox, Castle, Vassell, Champagne and Wemby, and that's a good ass lineup. Like that is a really tough team to be on either side of the ball, with Vassell and Champagne both being volume 39% 3-point shooters. And like I kind of alluded to it earlier, Wemby's roll gravity, the stuff you have to do to prevent Wemby from catching the ball at the paint. San Antonio takes more corner threes than any other team in NBA history. And it's like, if those are being funneled to 40% 3-point shooters who will get it up with volume, they're going to be a good offense and defense in the playoffs. I trust them so much on both sides of the ball. They have such a proven recipe. And when I went through and made my playoff kind of top versus top 10 teams metrics that I've been referencing throughout the show, them and OKC were the only teams where it's like, there's just no weaknesses. Like Spurs have an elite half court offense and defense against top 10 teams. They have an elite transition offense. They don't turn the ball over. They're the number one defensive rebounding team. They have an amazing clutch net rating. They have an amazing starting five net rating. It's like every single variable you look for in a championship caliber team, San Antonio checks the box. I think they match up against OKC better than any other team in the league. So they check that box. And it's just the fact that OKC has a little bit more of a proven recipe to me that leads to championships. And then also their late game offense with Shea, like that variable of, we have someone who we can consistently go to. I think Fox's usage in the clutch is way too high to be relied on for play like a championship run. But if everything goes right, like this is a championship caliber team. Absolutely. And I think if we weren't dealing with a juggernaut like OKC, they'd be a champion in most normal seasons.
I mean, the metrics are absolutely ridiculous. They're 27-3 in their last 30. They're probably going to win like 63 games. I mean, that's what they'll be at if they win out. And when Wemby's on the court, they're a plus 17 net team. I mean, like he is hitting heights in terms of his on-court net rating as a superstar that on the record, we've only seen Shea, KD when he was playing with Steph, and then Steph Curry hit. Like it's historic stuff. And then when he's off the court, they're better than a +3 net team, and they're 11-5 in games entirely without him, and they're 49-14 in games with him. Like, it's just so absurd everything they're doing. When Wemby's on the court, they're a negative 9.3 relative defense, which is right there with OKC, and OKC's the best relative defense since the 60s Celtics. So they're a historic defense when Wemby plays. And then they're also the number one offense over the last 30 games. Like, they're just a ridiculously good team. And like you say, they check every box. I guess my only question is, as much as I do believe in all of the advantages that they create, right, mostly just through sheer athleticism and the size and the Wemby factor, but like the fact that they have 3 guards who can create so many paint touches. They're just this elite paint offense overall. And then the pressure that puts on the basket, the pressure that Wemby puts on the basket, especially as a roller and just with his size, presence in the paint, like it's absurd. And then, like you said, they manufacture the most corner threes in NBA history, and they have some really, really good 3-point shooting wings, like some specialists who hover around 40% there. So all that stuff I think is super, super legit, and it's why they've been the number one offense. And also, Wemby has leveled up again in like this later stretch of the season. He's having his best stretch of his career. Obviously now he's banged up with the rib thing, so that's something. Hopefully he's fine. But since March 1st, he's averaging 27.5 points per game on 64.5% true shooting in 29 minutes. That's what he's doing over the last 18 games. So he's just barbecuing everybody. And then the young guards have been insane in that same time. Like Castle is giving you 17, 6, and 9 on 60% true shooting. Harper is giving you 14, 4, and 4 on 69% true shooting. The guy's shooting 60% from the field. So the level they're getting from those three is unbelievable and is like really, really crucial to this team being as dominant as they've been. My questions are just, how much is that level going to hold up? And that is what I do question more than Boston. Like the shooting overall, they have the few guys who are really good spot up shooters you talked about, right? Vassell, Champagny, Harrison Barnes. But as a team, in their first 49 games, the Spurs were 23rd in three-point percentage and 21st in threes made. In the last 30 games, they are 4th in three-point percentage and 7th in threes made. So they've gone from bad shooting team below average to like just flat out elite. And I think we've laid out the reasons why they create this very high three-point shot quality. But another factor is guys who were shooting horribly now shooting very well. Like Castle, before the All-Star break, was a 28.8% three-point shooter. Since the All-Star break, he's a 41% three-point shooter. Dylan Harper, before the All-Star break, was a 25% three-point shooter. Since the All-Star break, he's a 49% three-point shooter. So these guys are only taking a couple a game, right? Obviously, they are downhill players, and they're mostly just taking shots when like they're left wide open. Nevertheless, it's a big difference in terms of their offensive effectiveness in game planning if they can make a combined 45% of their threes versus a combined like 27% of their threes. And I just think the reality is probably closer to the former. Not saying that they're going to shoot that badly. I actually like how Harper's shot looks right now. It looks very comfortable for him. But I think these guys are like more realistically low 30s kind of three-point shooters, even when they're getting the open ones. And then I do have some concerns about Fox as your number one perimeter and clutch scorer. The Spurs have actually still been an awesome clutch offense this year, but Fox has not been awesome in the clutch. And there is something of an inconsistency with his pull-up jump shooting that is just a little nitpick that I have with them. And then Wemby, like you said, the impact is always going to be there. I do worry, though, a little bit about him dealing with the swarm, some of the turnover stuff, some of just him managing double teams against really long athletic teams. Now, again, when you do that, when you send extra attention at Wemby, you're compromising elsewhere, and you're probably going to allow some corner threes. And I think that's a challenge for OKC specifically, like this OKC team that believes so deeply in the principles of swarm, help like crazy. We have the speed to recover. We're going to cause chaos. It's like, well, when Harper and Castle and Fox are consistently getting into the paint, they're creating open corner threes. And when you're trying to swarm Wemby consistently off the roll, like you're leaving openings for corner threes elsewhere. So that's another little advantage they have in that matchup. But I'm just not as confident in kind of all of the core offensive elements here as I am with Boston. And that's why when I went through this mental exercise, again, San Antonio in terms of the metrics, number one offense for a while, whose offenses do I trust most in the playoffs? I landed on Denver above them. I landed on Boston, Cleveland, and OKC above them. I had the Spurs tied for 5th. And so that's just the one little nitpick I have, even though I think they absolutely can beat OKC. They can win the title. I do just prefer the offense that I believe in so much with Boston by a little bit.
Real quick, I wanted to throw one more kind of issue I have with San Antonio that's very nitpicky, but I think matters a lot is I actually think in every series the Spurs play, they're going to win the Wemby minutes. I don't think Wemby can ramp up his minutes to like 40 like Shea and Jokic do. And I think that might be the deciding factor. Like Wemby has some conditioning concerns still, and not obviously not with the rib injury, like we got to worry about his body holding up as well.
True.
But like usually what determines these playoff series is like, for example, you go back to Cleveland, LeBron was ramping up his like to 46 minutes in these big games. Yeah. Jokic last year ramping up to over 40 minutes a game. Shea, same thing, 40 minutes in these must-win games. I don't know if Wemby can do that. So it could be the type of thing where like we get this weird, like the Russell Westbrook signal against Houston where they won his minutes like very slightly. They're like +2. And then in the very like 5 minutes he sat there like -60. And it's like, I think that could be something that happens with the Spurs where even in an OKC matchup, I actually think they will win the Wemby minutes. But how many minutes will that be? I think that's a really big variable they have to address.
I think that's a good point. Logan?
I mean, I think the Spurs can hoist the trophy this year, and I think they cause a lot of matchup issues for a team like Denver. I mean, I think they cause problems for Denver and OKC more so than any other team in basketball, and that's why they're number 2 for me. For OKC, I mean, what Wemby does individually to Chet Holmgren and what he can do to limit Shea's impact inside the arc is really massive. And then in that Denver matchup, I mentioned this last time we talked about the Denver Spurs game, but I think we are headed towards a very seminal moment in either NBA history or in just Victor Wembanyama's career and trajectory as the best player in basketball in this Jokic matchup, where at the end of that series, the conclusion that we are going to reach is either Wemby is already the, second best player in basketball, arguably, or if you wanted to make the argument that he is the best, or it's going to be a very big learning experience for him in this kind of passing of the torch moment where that moment is delayed, where Jokic bests him because he's the master of the craft and has all the tools in his toolkit, and it's Wemby's, this is his, I'm not going to say villain arc, but it's his, he's got to figure out how to beat Jokic head-to-head to take that kind of throne. But when I think about it, I do think Jokic has the advantage of getting Wemby in space and the strength and the short-range shot-making that limits Wemby's impact defensively. I also think San Antonio has a real advantage with their guards where I don't know who is going to hold these guards consistently over a 7-game series on the perimeter, where Castle, Harper, and Fox should be able to get downhill at will and just spam offense. Like, I'm very close to 50-50 in that matchup, but I lean San Antonio. Again, because of these athletic advantages that I think the guards have consistently over a longer series.
And also Wemby. I mean, Wemby fried the Nuggets. So that's where I think I would go Spurs in 7. I think Jokic is the perfect counter for everything that Wemby does defensively. And yet I still think like the Spurs offense poses major, major problems for the Nuggets. And this game that we just saw in which Jokic was incredible, like the Spurs lost in overtime, 2-point game, in like an actual Jokic masterclass, as Denver also made over 40% of their threes at big volume, and the Spurs shot just okay, and Fox wasn't good in the clutch. So it's like, I'm not downplaying that Nuggets win. I think it meant a lot, and I think it said a lot about how impervious Jokic is to Wemby, and the Denver offense is in like a way that nobody else in the NBA is. Like the difference between how comfortable the Nuggets offense looks against the Spurs and the Thunder offense, like it's big. But then I really don't think the Nuggets have the defensive personnel to make the Spurs offense uncomfortable. And so when it comes to like, what do the Spurs need to do to figure Jokic out? Like, I actually don't know that should be their priority, because I think the clear solution is, okay, how do we use Wemby as a roamer? Okay, we have to play Cornette. And it's like, why? Like, let Jokic get his, let the offense get theirs, so you have your best offensive lineup, which has been an elite offense in its own right. Like, I think unless things are going quite badly for the Spurs, they shouldn't even press that double big button, because it brings their offense so many rungs down, and this offense has been a machine. And like you said, Logan, I don't think the Nuggets can contain the ball with this sort of perimeter speed and athleticism. I don't think that they can guard Wemby. So I think it would be an amazing series, and I do think there is this dynamic of Spurs really scare Thunder, Nuggets don't scare Thunder, but Nuggets really scare Spurs. Like, and I think that's really fun, and I'm actually thrilled, even though it's going to be kind of weird seeing either the Rockets or probably the husk of the Lakers advance. That is the downside of the seeding shifting, but the upside is we get to see Nuggets Timberwolves, which is a great matchup, and then if the Nuggets advance, Nuggets Spurs, which like I want to see as badly as I've wanted to see any playoff series in my lifetime. Like genuinely, I want to see Wemby Jokic over 7 games so badly. But I think the reason you have to have San Antonio above them is just because they're scarier to, like you said, every other NBA team probably than Denver is, but specifically OKC. And so at a base level, I do think the Spurs are the better basketball team than the Nuggets. But those healthy Nuggets, man, you can't take it for granted, and you can't take a Jokic and red-hot Jamal Murray playoff offense for granted because, I mean, you were saying you think they might be the GOAT half-court offense?
Yeah.
It's not crazy.
I think so. Like,
it's not crazy.
But
statistically, I mean, it's the 2017 Warriors for me.
I'll say statistically, at least from a raw standpoint, I'm pretty sure it's last year's Cavs in the regular season were the number one half-court offense ever.
All right.
Then I think it's this year's Nuggets. But like those numbers I pulled, they have a 103 offensive rating in the half court against top 10 defenses. That is so absurd to me. The fact that they're just like immune. I mean, obviously they have not solved the OKC hurdle, but also I want to see this version of Jamal Murray in a playoff series against OKC because Jamal Murray has really leveled up.
But he still hasn't been good against OKC this year.
He hasn't, and that's why, I think it's tough. I mean, relative to the league, the best half-court offense ever is probably those Warriors, and then also like the Steve Nash Suns and stuff. And
exactly.
Probably some Mavs team, but I'm just talking like raw, like without relativity. I think that this current Nuggets team might be the best, like most complete half-court offense ever in terms of options. Like they really check every box except for I do think, and this is an OKC issue and a Minnesota issue really. I don't really know if I still trust their ability to deal with ball pressure. I think that's where the Westbrook actually is going to be missed in some of these matchups. The ability to just get the ball up the court and get into your offense cleanly without knocking off 12 seconds of clock. Like, do you remember that Minnesota game earlier in the season where they had that amazing defensive possession in clutch time where it took like 12 seconds for Denver to even set their first screen of the possession? And then they only had one action. It didn't create anything because of Minnesota's, obviously, they're just a defensive juggernaut against Denver. I think that's a problem. But besides that, the half-court offense is pretty flawless. Especially, like, if you can get the ball to Jokic on the elbow, your offense becomes flawless, essentially.
Yeah, that's true. But I do think that's going to be another interesting counter they're going to have to try to figure out against the Thunder. Because, I mean, they struggle to get the ball to Jokic a lot. They struggle to get the ball past half court. Like, I don't think that Gordon as the ball handler is the counter it is against OKC that it's been against some other teams because you're dealing with OKC ball pressure and perimeter defense. And Murray, is getting turned around and being made uncomfortable. And then obviously they have the whole put Caruso or J-Dub on Jokic in front and just deny him. And like, I really think OKC's defense has pretty convincingly won that matchup.
Yeah.
And so I don't even know that that's a knock on Denver as like their GOAT half-court offense case, though, because the 05 Suns weren't dealing with a defense like that in their conference. They did have the peak Spurs.
I would say OKC is probably the GOAT half-court defense.
Yeah, I mean, genuinely, I just think if we're doing no relativity, and I'm always pro-relativity, that's how I judge everything, but like, I mean, come on. If you're just saying, oh yeah, drop this defense in any era, like it's the Thunder right now. It's just different levels of defensive talent. But I do think even relative, they're the best defense other than the 60 Celtics. So yeah, I went and I looked back at the gap between the 05 Suns and the 2026 Nuggets, and it's basically identical in terms of half-court offense. So it's a compelling case. Obviously, the transition is a separator, but yeah, I mean, I think consistently, we've had this conversation before, I want to say, specifically about the Nuggets of, I think, 2024 as being like one of the very best half-court offenses ever. 2023, they certainly played like that in the playoffs, and this is the most explosive, best regular season offense they've ever had. And there's a lot of guys who go into that, but definitely Murray, Gordon, THJ, some of the biggest. So, do we feel like we've covered everything other than OKC here? Is there any other shouts, any other stats we want to get in there? So, why then, Tyler, are the Thunder still number one?
It's like the same things we're just going to hash over and over again. They just dominate the margins. It's like I referenced earlier that they just overwhelmingly win the turnover battle because they're the best team in the league at taking care of the ball, or second, and they're the best team in the league, the best team in NBA history at forcing turnovers, especially when they get guys like Caruso out there and Case and Wallace out there. They're going to create so many easy opportunities in transition, and they're going to take away so many opportunities from their opponent. They're also an elite transition defense. Teams don't get easy opportunities to run out against them, not only against turnovers, but against live rebounds. You can't get out and run against them. Even Indiana in the finals struggled to generate easy transition opportunities, and they're one of the best transition offenses of all time.
Yeah.
OKC shooting is a little bit of a question mark in certain matchups, but also Shea could just ramp up his volume to 30 shots a game, and I don't even think that'd be terrible offense because there's nothing you can do to stop him from getting to his spots unless you just start, like, unless you literally send 3 bodies at him because not even blitzes are able to keep Shea away from his spots. Like, there was that game recently against Detroit that he closed the fourth quarter. They were blitzing him almost near half court every play, and he just beats the double and gets to the mid-range or draws a foul. And it's like, you just can't do anything with that. And he's never going to turn the ball over. So there is that, his ability to just impose himself on games. There's the J-Dub variable. There's Chet Holmgren in his offensive growth is like a big difference from last year's playoffs, where now Chet's a legit guy who can get you 20 points a game efficiently. And then also his versatility unlocks all types of different floor alignments as a spacer because he's both a shooter and a lob threat. He can be used as a screener. You can get iHeart out there with the non-Shea minutes, and you get this McCain and Isaiah Joe look where you get a more motion-heavy offense, delay action, and all that good stuff. And I just think OKC's recipe is we are the best defense maybe in NBA history. We're absolutely the best defense of the modern era, and we can get our defense off against every type of offense. Denver's kind of the big question mark, and they have, like Carson said, owned that matchup. Just absolutely owned that matchup defensively. And then we have one of the best offensive floor racers in NBA history. And when our shots start falling, and when Chet gets hot, and when J-Dub's going, now we're just a top 5 offense and then a number 1 defense in basketball. They have a proven playoff recipe. I'd say they're a lot better on the margins this year, even especially with AJ Mitchell's growth and the addition of Jared McCain. They've got lineup versatility. The only thing they sacrifice is rebounding. And it's like, hey, if you're going to beat us in the rebound battle, so what? We're going to win every other battle. We're still going to win the series. So I do think OKC is pretty comfortably, for me, still the best team in basketball. I penciled them in at 1 pretty quickly.
They are comfortably my favorite too, and it's the SGA and defense formula. I mean, SGA is at this unstoppable level where, like you're saying, Tyler, if you're not intentionally compromising your defense on the back end, Shea's going to get his. And so I do think the best recipe for opposing teams is to load up on Shea and force other guys to beat you. I will say I think OKC is better than last year. I do look at them as they are my favorite too, but I do look at them as vulnerable. I could see OKC getting beaten. It's very specific, but if Hartenstein went down, I think I would look at OKC as vulnerable because of how important he is to them on the glass. But it's more so due to the inconsistency and health of J-Dub this season. You wonder how much can they depend on him. He had a down series against Denver last year. Again, he's rarely been healthy for an extended stretch this year. And then it is the shooting, where it's frustrating at times with OKC, right? When their jump shooters are on, when Lou Dort is cashing everything that's open, they bludgeon teams, and they can just run you out of the building in a quarter. When their shots are off, they can be suffocating defensively, and they may only be up by 2 points. And so it's this push-pull dynamic. But like Tyler said, even though I do think they're vulnerable, with the additions that they've made this year and the improvements that they've made, they still are my favorite. AJ Mitchell has been phenomenal. Jared McCain has been such an awesome addition for this team. They still do have other buttons they can push off the bench if it's an Isaiah Joe to turn to, right? So OKC is still my favorite. I think SGA is the best player on the planet. They have the best defense that I've ever seen. It would legitimately take them being injured with a key guy in their top 6 to me for me to not take them to win the West. If that domino fell, if it was a J-Dub or an iHeart going out, I would maybe consider another team upsetting them. But barring a drastic health event, I'm taking OKC to win the title pretty concretely.
I really don't think they need J-Dub to win the title.
Wow.
I think what they need is J-Dub to not be a problem if he is on the court. Like, genuinely, I think that they're 34-4 without J-Dub this year, if I remember correctly. And yet some of their worst stretches have come because J-Dub is in the game in a pretty high usage role and like actively playing badly on offense. So that's more the concern. I mean, he's going to be out there, so you just need him to be good. And that is, a question about OKC at this point. And he hasn't been good pretty much all year. So like that does concern me. He's really struggled in big matchups. I am a J-Dub believer. I think he is such a great defensive player and such a versatile player, but we got to see the jump shot start to fall. And that's literally what it's all going to come down to for OKC. Like, if OKC shoots at an average level, they're going to win the title. If OKC shoots at a really high level, I think we're going to talk about them as one of the greatest teams to ever play the game. If OKC shoots below average badly, that's where they're vulnerable, and you can't write off the possibility of that. Even though bottom line, they typically fall as like a pretty average three-point shooting team, like it's really going to come down to the shooting specifically of their best defenders, because what is a certainty at this point is all the margin stuff you said, Tyler. The GOAT level defense, the Mount Rushmore level scoring season we're getting from Shea, who I think is having the greatest on-ball scoring season in the history of the NBA. If I remember correctly, 2 of the 5 most efficient play types on record with a certain minimum of like 300 possessions, I think, are a Shea ISO and a Shea pick and roll this season. He self-creates the most offense in basketball, and he does so more efficiently than any other player. Like, it is absolutely unfathomable. You put the ball in his hands, you spread out around him, he is going to get you a great shot every time. He rarely misses, he never turns the ball over, and his decision-making has gotten so good, his playmaking has gotten so good, that he just creates crazy amounts of wide-open threes for his teammates, and so then it comes down to, can they make them? That's really what it's all about. And specifically, I highlight the best defensive players because if Kaysen, Caruso, Dort, J-Dub, Chet, if those 5 shoot like a combined 36% from 3, OKC's winning the title going away, because then they have the greatest defense of the modern era with what is going to be a top 3 offense, because Shea's just going to give you 32 a game on 65+% true shooting. Like, that's what he's going to do. I know he wasn't that level as a scorer in the playoffs last year, but I think he is better in every possible way this year than he was last year, and he's a better playmaker. And so then it comes down to, can we be awesome offensively in our most dominant defensive lineups? If the answer is no, which it may be because Caruso has been a brick this year, J-Dub has been a brick, Chet has been a brick in the playoffs over the last 2 years when you talk about his three-point shooting, Dort's having a down shooting season. Like, there are some real questions here. That's when it comes back to the Boston dilemma that I was talking about, where you can force them into more offensive-centric lineups, which they have now, because they didn't have a Jared McCain last year. AJ Mitchell was not nearly the player he is and wasn't even healthy for a lot of last year, wasn't in the playoff rotation. So they have that ability now, but it does come at the expense, potentially, of this GOAT-level defense. But if they're checking the boxes with their best defensive lineups, also making shots, nobody's beating OKC, not even San Antonio, although they have posed a lot of problems. So I do think you look at this team when they shoot 40+% from 3, they're 24-3 this year. They're 56-8 over the last 2 years. Like, they've been unbeatable when they can check that box. And that's the nuclear outcome here. That's where we look at this team. We're like, oh yeah, they had the 3rd best net rating in NBA history this season. They won 68 games last year, won the title, and then got better in every way. If they follow that up with a dominant playoff run, that's when I think this team really starts to figure into some all-time conversations. And it is crazy when you just look at the top 4 teams by net rating in NBA history, regular season. It's the 96-97 Bulls and the 25 and 26 Thunder. I don't think that gets talked about quite enough. And then they do have more offensive depth. I think AJ is a real difference maker for this team. I think there's several X-factor players for OKC I look at. And J-Dub is the first, because I honestly just think he's got to make his catch and shoot jumpers, and he's got to be solid in terms of his self-created offense. But if he scales down the volume a bit, but is making 37% of his catch and shoot threes playing off of Shea, that's fine. That's great, because put the ball in Shea's hands and he's going to create amazing offense. I don't think the need is as much for another ball handler at volume as it is just for good shooting around Shea. But then when J-Dub is right, he also is another ball handler. So he's very important. AJ Mitchell, I really do think, is such an X factor for this team. And I feel like this is going to be a breakout run for him on a national stage. Like I've said many times this year that he's been their 2nd best offensive player this season. And I think it's pretty clear. Like, he's just been a much better creator than J-Dub when he's on the court. And he's been key to them, like, dominating the non-Shea minutes. When AJ is on the court without Shea, OKC is still a +14 net team. Like, that's been an unbelievable configuration for them. So he's really important in terms of being another ball handler alongside Shea, who can create advantages, who can actually attack off the catch and make plays, because that's another flaw of some of these role players around him. It's spread out around Shea, and you guys need to make your catch and shoot jumpers. And if you get run off the line, what is Lou Dort's offense? What is Caruso's offense? What is Kaysen's offense? It's not very good. AJ Mitchell is a guy who can make a ton of plays in those spots for himself and others. So I just think he's really, really important for this team, and I'm really excited to see what he does in this playoff run. I think he's really good and going to be a difference maker. And then Chet, I'm very interested in because I'm a huge Chet optimist believer. I always have been. And I think the offensive improvement this year has been real, as you alluded to, Tyler. Like the level of mid-range ISO post-up game we're getting from him this year just didn't exist for him last year. And his 2-point percentage overall is 10% higher than last year. Like he's been a substantially better offensive player on average. But then when you get to some of these bigger matchups, and especially against the Spurs, which is a beast of its own because he's either being guarded by Wemby or more often having to deal with Wemby as a roamer and dealing with like these feisty perimeter defenders who he's not comfortable handling against. Like Chet against the Spurs offensively is a concern for me. And Chet overall has just never been the same in the playoffs offensively as he was in the regular seasons. And I think the self-created offense with him can get a little bit trickier against really good playoff defenses. He can have some issues with physicality and more ball pressure and the handle being tested. And then the shot hasn't held up in the playoffs. So if those things change this year, I think Chet's going to be awesome in the playoffs, and I'm more confident in him than ever before. But I also don't think it's just like a sure thing at all that regular season Chet offensively is going to translate 100% to the playoffs. Like that is a question I have about this team. And then another really interesting player who I feel like has emerged as more of an important guy for OKC is Jay Will. Because he's always been in the rotation for this team, but he really wasn't in the playoff rotation last year, not meaningfully. And I can just see them turning to him more this year because of the shooting and playmaking. Like, he's a better three-point shooter than Chet. And the percentages support that, but more so like just the consistency of the shot. I mean, Chet gets in these lows where he's leaving it flat and short. Like, Jay Will, maybe I'm just more confident in it because it's a prettier shot, but I also think it's been a more effective shot. He shot it at more volume on a per-possession basis at like a 39% clip. So when Shea plays with Jay Will, those are like plus 20 net lineups. So I think if you're talking about like a true 5-out, max-out shooting look, Jay Will is very important to that. And I think there might be some minutes where he's the lone big. I think we'll definitely see him as a big along with Chet. I think he's somebody who can be deployed as a post defender, as sort of a diet Hartenstein, big body, if you're thinking about like the Denver matchup, for example. So it's interesting. Like, I do view OKC as a level above everybody else because I think GOAT defense plus GOAT level scorer plus GOAT transition turnover margin, all this stuff, like it's absolutely insane. But I do think there's like a number of key players who they're relying on where it's like you don't really know what you're going to get. And the playoffs are going to be very telling on that front.
I'm surprised you didn't mention Caruso too. I mean, I think he's
his shooting, absolutely.
I just mean he could drown a team if he's playing big minutes. He could drown them in the clutch where I feel like Queso over everybody else when I'm looking at, complimentary. I mean, I love Kaysen too, but I just feel like I don't worry about him offensively as much as I do a guy like Caruso. But isn't that crazy, man? Even when they've been injured, like there have been multiple instances where Jay Will has stepped up when they've been down guys and just sprayed a barrage of threes and swung a game. Like that Denver one obviously sticks out as the big one, but OKC's depth is still, I think, the best in the league too. Obviously, they have their superpowers, Shea in this defense, but they also have an incredible amount of lineup versatility and combinations and just impactful role players that they can turn to any given game, any given day, and they can swing a game.
I'm such a Caruso truther. Like, I think he's just the definition of a championship player. He is an absolute game-breaking defender.
Pissing me
and he's
off
so
sometimes.
Smart. But it's like, man, if Wemby can roam off of you and you're going to go 1 of 11 from
detrimental.
3, like, what does that look like? He has been the most damaging player to the Thunder offense in big matchups against the Spurs, also in that matchup against the Celtics that they lost. So I don't know if I'm as high on Caruso this year as last year because I would like to think he can just start shooting better, but he hasn't been for an entire season, so that is definitely a concern. I do think also when we talk about the Spurs matchup, obviously it's a concern for OKC, and it's a huge point in the Spurs' favor. I also do think last time we saw this matchup, the Thunder did look a lot more comfortable, and they got the win, and Shea looked comfortable, and they gave Wemby some trouble on the other end. And the other thing that I think is really important is in the two really ugly Thunder losses to the Spurs, AJ Mitchell didn't play. And so I do think having another guy who can create some stuff for the offense like that is really important in all matchups, and especially in that matchup. And like, really all of the rough stretches for OKC this year have come without AJ Mitchell for the most part. I'm pulling up their record with him this season, but it's ridiculous. Like, they've barely lost when he's on the court.
The lineups with AJ Mitchell and Shea have a 9% turnover percentage.
Jesus. Yeah, that's the thing. He's a Shea disciple. He doesn't turn the ball over. They're 49-7 when AJ Mitchell plays this year.
Pretty good.
So like, that's pretty compelling, dude. Pretty compelling.
What's that? That's on pace for that's got to be on pace for 70 wins, right?
Yeah,
49-7.
That's on pace for 72.
Yeah. So that's pretty good. It's pretty good.
I really do think, not to glaze the Thunder a little more, if not for injuries, they would be probably on like a 70 win pace. Now, it's hard for me to say that when they've played better without J-Dub, but they've still had a lot of injuries all around this year, and the AJ one is a significant one, and Shea obviously getting hurt. Like, even though they played pretty well without him, that's a couple losses.
They were banged up last year too.
Yeah, and
I think Mitchell's going to close pretty much every playoff game that comes down to the wire.
I feel like he is, about to have such a moment.
He might even be like a 30-minute per game guy in the playoffs. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
100%. I think he's so important, and I think the difference between him and a Joe or a McCain is, first of all, I mean, he's obviously a much better creator, much better playmaker, way better off the dribble, all that. The other two are very much more so just like three-point shooters, and they're better at that than AJ. But it's also that he can actually hold his own defensively. Like,
I'd say he's even like a good defender. Like, he's
I would agree.
Really good defender.
I would agree. I mean, he's stout. He pressures the ball. He's got good hands. He's got good instincts. Like, Jaylen Brown can target an AJ Mitchell, when he's going up against the Thunder, and it's like, shit, there's nobody to target. But like, there's very few players who are looking at him and even close to licking their chops. Like, I do agree he's a plus defender, and that's why, like, the groups when he's been entrusted with the offense without Shea, he makes the offense solid enough, and then the defense is still like nuclear because he's not giving up any ground on that side of the ball. So I'm extremely high on him, and I do think he's the biggest weapon they have this year that they didn't have last year. I mean, the two biggest differences are Shea getting even better and me thinking he's going to be better in a playoff run this time around than he already was, and AJ Mitchell. Those are the two things that I would point to most. Tyler, we didn't take 9 hours, but we took pretty close to it. A solid 3 hours of your time. Thank you so much for giving it to us. Everybody go support Tyler. Hoop Venue. Go watch his stuff on YouTube. It's just fantastic. Check out the Hoop Venue podcast he was mentioning. So you did your whole All-NBA teams already, huh?
We did, and I also had LaMelo on there. You were
nice.
talking about that at the beginning.
Yeah.
My two really tough cuts were Brunson and Harden. I did not feel good about that.
Ooh,
I did end up cutting Brunson and Harden for.
Wow.
My third team ended up being LaMelo, Jalen Duren. It was Scotty Barnes, Jalen Johnson, and Derek White. And I had even at the end of our episode, we were 2 hours in and I still could not find, I had 8 people on my third team until like the very last minute of the episode. It was like, cause I also had Mobley in that mix too. And I just could not figure out how to separate them. It was, that was a nightmare. I would not suggest doing an all NBA teams episode.
We're doing it. It
was awful. It was the worst process. I hate it, man.
It also sucks because it's like, what are we going to do with Luka? Are we going to wait to see if his special exception is approved?
Right, and that's what made the third team.
Now.
That's what made the third team such a nightmare. Because like, if Cade, Ant, and Luka were eligible, I wouldn't have had to go into the depths of these weird, like getting Derek White over Jalen Brunson. I don't even want to have to think about that.
I know.
Maybe we just go rogue and say fuck Adam Silver and do our own shit.
That'd be a lot more enjoyable. I'll tell you that. Like Sean and I were like, it was grueling.
Yeah.
Man.
We could take that angle. I mean, these are the correct, historically accurate All-NBA teams. When we look back, this is what's right, because this shit is so stupid, bro. So stupid. Like, I've talked about it so many times. We don't need this artificial bar to clear. If we were to have one, it should be lower than what it is. You shouldn't have all of these players who are like in serious danger when it's like, oh man, you missed it by 1 game. You missed it by 4 games. Oh, it's infuriating. But yeah, that's what's coming up for us, folks. So that's going to be our last show of the week. We're going to do awards and All NBA. Stay tuned in for that. And Again, make sure that you go and follow and support Tyler everywhere. Any last words before we let you go, my friend?
No, man, it's always a blast being on here. Definitely, I need to hop back on sometime during the playoffs. Maybe like a Nuggets Spurs preview or something.
That would be super fun.
Unless they lose to Minnesota. I mean, I'm setting stuff in stone. We need to. You know what we need to do is if we get Pistons Cavs, we need to revisit that little.
Yeah. Although I think we've already said everything. I don't know. Is there a hypothetical we didn't?
We can do like 8 hours just on Pistons Cavs.
Well, actually,
I would love that.
The pod's not over yet, Tyler. We're gonna rank our top 100 NBA players right now.
Ooh,
there we go.
I love that. Okay, I've got AJ Mitchell dangerously high.
I also have AJ Mitchell dangerously high. I actually have been ranking my top 100 players, and I'll never release it because I know I know what'll happen if I like have some of these like high end scorers in the 60s and 70s, and then have role players at 35. I know what happens. It's never worth it. That's why I always like when I do.
Why is it Josh Giddey in your top 40? He had 6 triple doubles this year.
It's funny, or like why is Chet encroaching on top 15? It's like because he's that good. The defense.
Yeah, thank you, Tyler. Thank you. People hated me having Chet at 16 so much. Now, to be fair, I have gone back and I'd said I would flip him and Jaylen Brown. I had him one spot above Jaylen Brown. But the impact, don't undersell Chet's impact. He's an impact.
Right, yeah. And also like Derek White in the top 25 conversation is another one I'd have that would make people mad. But it's funny, that's why I always cut, like when I do my end of season rankings, I cut it down to like the top 25. Because like I'm like, if I get into the 60s and I'm talking about some of these guys' favorite all-stars, this is just not going to be a good look for
I
the
would
channel.
love to see it. I would love to see it. I want to see Paolo Banchero 94.
Whoa, okay, let's calm down. No, but like one guy I'm really low on is Brandon Ingram, and I'm like,
I was about to say that.
There's a
Logan's
loud
high.
Brandon Ingram
Logan's
fan base out there that I do
Brandon
not
Ingram's
want to upset.
Sweet.
I would hear a Brandon Ingram in the 50 range.
Yeah,
I think I would have him just outside my top 40.
Analytics nerds, man. They don't care about tough buckets, bro.
We'll see how it goes.
Or like Cooper Flag is another one where it's like if we're talking about immediate impact, Cooper Flag's not going to be as high on the list as like. Because with these young stars, it always turns into projection. Like I remember in 2024, Paolo Banchero was like a top 15 player to top 20 player on every media outlet, and I was like,
ludicrous.
Dude, he might not ever be that in his career.
Yeah,
and now he's not even getting ranked top 30 anymore, and he's still the same player.
The projection of it all is crazy. If you're the number 1 overall pick and you're putting up big counting stats, and by the way, don't take this as a flag thing, people who are outraged that I think Con should be Rookie of the Year. But I do think there is even a dynamic of it with Flag, who I think is going to be amazing, but it's like the baby superstar. You see him, and it's like, oh, clearly this is going to be a superstar, and therefore he is closer to that right now than he actually is. And that happened with Paolo more than like anyone. Like, I didn't even think Paolo had an all-star argument in 2024. It happened with Cade.
Like 2 years ago, they were ranking Cade really high, and I was like, he's not there yet. Now I'm like, okay, Cade is really that good. But it's like, it happens with every young star pretty much.
Especially if they have a good team, but the fact that they have a good team is because the defense is awesome, like it was with Paolo. And it's like, oh, they're worse with him on the court, and their offense is absolutely atrocious. Well, we have to give him the credit because he's the number 1 overall pick, and he's got the counting stats. This may relate to a video that I'm working on right now, folks. We'll see. Maybe something coming down the line.
Yeah, maybe. Hopefully I'm not working on the exact same video and you upload it before me.
Bro, you don't get to be mad at me about that because that's happened to me with you way more times. I guarantee.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I just thought it was funny. I was like, man, of course he had to get me on Easter weekend, man. Like, come on.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I'm a godless individual.
I'm eating dinner with my cousins and I'm seeing you upload my video. I'm like, come on, man.
No, I stole it bar for bar, I'm sure. But, you know. That's just how it goes, man. You got to get the content out.
Yeah, you beat me to the punch. I'll get you back in the playoffs. Don't worry.
I know. No doubt about that. No doubt about that. Well, what I do have you on is you're ducking the smoke with your top 100 players. I'll take all of the smoke. Somebody come at me for Paolo Banchero 94.
You will take all the smoke. I saw you taking some smoke on Twitter just today. You had a Rookie of the Year video, right? Which was very well thought out, and it very clearly emphasized both points, like both arguments. You gave a lot of praise to Flag. You said he was the second best player under 25 in your opinion.
To build around.
And the reason it popped up on my For You page is because I saw a quote that said, "Oh, this guy hates Flag and Luka." Like, how is that interpreted as Flag hate?
I posted a video of Flag who just like passed the ball to Ryan Nembhard at the top of the key, and then there was like a full 2 beats, and then they ran an entirely separate pick and roll. They called up somebody to screen for Nembhard, and he got to the rim himself, like 3-4 dribbles, and it was counted as an assist for flag. And I was just like, this is ridiculous that this is counted as an assist in the NBA. Like, but we don't consider, spoon feeding somebody at the rim, but they get fouled and they make 2 free throws because it's not a made shot. Like, if we're going to count this as an assist, like, we just need to reconsider what this all means, because it's not actually measuring passing value at all. And then somebody was like, pulling out clips of Flag to blame him for things that are out of his control. I'm like, no, man, I'm watching Cooper Flag have an awesome game, and whenever I see this shit, it annoys me. Like, it's not the first time I've done this, but I'm just like, it's insane to me that that's an assist. But,
dude, it's funny because that one popped up on my For You on Twitter too, and it was a different quote. It was someone saying, oh, but Carson didn't post the clip of Jokic getting dribble handoff assists. Like, dude, what are we doing, man?
Dude, this is why, like, as I've said before, Twitter is a one-way platform for me. I post and then I get out of there because I'm like,
I used to be
gained.
Well, I was gonna say, I used to be entrapped in, like, where I would be sitting there arguing with people on Twitter, like, back and forth, doing the whole, like, and then at a certain point, I actually got banned on Twitter at one. It was my old KG's GOAT account.
Yeah,
I don't
remember
know how
that.
it got banned, but once it got banned and I went, like, I just decided I'm not gonna make another account. I went like 6 months without Twitter, and my quality of life improved drastically. Bro, I was like, dude, this app sucks.
Twitter brain is insane. I pulled up Twitter for 1 second yesterday, and I see this dude digging in and being like, CP3 is a fraud because his rim assist rate wasn't high enough. And I'm like, this is like, and I understand it. Like, I'm a super fucking pretentious, annoying basketball nerd who gets too into the weeds with all this stuff. But there is a portion of NBA Twitter that takes it to like unbelievable levels where I'm like, and I overthink stuff all the time for sure, but I'm like, you're overthinking the overthinking, man. Like, you've gotten into the weeds and then you've gone completely off the rails because you're trying to outsmart yourself and everybody.
I was going to say,
again,
I've been seeing a lot of that with people basically, like, they've been over analyzing RAPM numbers to the point where they're like questioning, was Tim Duncan like even a plus offensive player? And I'm like, dude, it gets to a point, bro. Like, it gets to a point where what are we doing? That's why it's funny. If you go to my Hoop Venue Twitter account now, it literally only posts my YouTube uploads. It has no other posts, basically. It's just like, I upload on YouTube, post on Hoop Venue, get off the app. And then if I have some other like unfiltered thoughts, I'll drop them on my personal account.
Right. Yeah. That's the thing, bro. I just like getting bite-sized thoughts out there. But shout out YouTube, shout out TikTok, shout out all you guys, Twitter, shout out you guys. Shout out you guys on Twitter too if you're not being, super weird all the time. But Tyler, thank you for coming on, man. This was fantastic as always. And with that, you guys know where to find our stuff, so I'm not even going to run it down. It's already been 3 hours. I've been Carson Brabber.
I've been Logan Camden.
I've been Tyler Britton.
And this was Nerd Sesh.